everybody, this is Jim Cornette, and I'm joined by one of my favorite wrestling managers and all-time personalities, Percy Pringle, Paul Bearer. Call him what you will, but he is my friend. Hello.
We've been waiting to do this for a long time. Hurricane Katrina tried to mess it up. Hurricane Rita tried to mess it up. But they ain't going to mess it up today. He said, we'll mess it up ourselves.
Well, actually, the thing is, we've been talking for the past 2 days. We've already actually done the interview amongst ourselves, so we're not really interested.
Don't lie to him. Every time the subject comes
we have nothing left to say.
Save it. Don't say it. Yeah. Save it for today. No,
but can we remember all our notes now?
I hope you can.
Oh no!
I'm depending on you.
Well, now you've done an interview singly with Ring of Honor. We talked about some of your early years, but I wasn't there and I didn't get to see it. So, tell me if I'm asking you something that you've already covered in another release, but at the same time, because we're so similar. Percy and I are so similar. We got into business almost exactly the same way. We were wrestling fans growing up. Instead of me and Kenny Boland sitting in the Louisville Gardens, it was you and Michael Hayes sitting down in Mobile watching the matches. Who were your favorites when you were a kid watching
just like you. I mean, I've watched, preparing for this, probably I shouldn't have done it, but I got to watch some stuff you've already done, especially the one with Bobby Heenan. And there's no secret, just like you, Bobby's my all-time hero.
Yeah, as all of us.
Exactly, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. But being, from where we're from, being Southern boys, like grits and eggs and cat head biscuits, and stuff like that. My exposure to managers, was very limited. Down on the Gulf Coast, I got to see J.C. Dykes, of course,
and the Infernos,
and I can't. A lot of managers.
Was J.C. Dykes the first manager to throw a fireball, or was that Saul Weingroff? Do you think? It has to. If I would be close,
I don't know. I'm sure you do.
Well. We'll have to edit that completely out because neither one of us know.
You're giving me a test.
We're supposed to be experts. Neither one of us knows.
It's one of the two.
Who were your favorite wrestlers when you were a kid?
Who wasn't my favorite? I loved it all. But like I said, growing up on the Gulf Coast, I got to see most of the guys that you enjoyed because they would make the start. They'd come down from the Tennessee, Kentucky area down to the Gulf Coast and back around again. But it was guys like Cowboy Bob Kelly, who from Louisville, Kentucky, of course. You know anybody from Louisville?
Passed through there a time or two.
Yeah. Ken Lucas, Mike the Hippie Boyette.
Mike the Hippie Boyette, who I managed as Apocalypse the Soldier of Fortune in Memphis in 1982.
Oh, gosh. And there's just so many. The real old-timers, Greg Peterson and Dick Dunn. And, my gosh, it's just, sometimes it's all a blur. But back then it was the territory days.
Yeah.
It's not like it is today. We didn't have cable TV. And just like you, I knew what day the magazines came out. And I was at my newsstand the day those magazines come out, and I got to see what happened at the Cow Palace. Nobody else in Mobile knew what went on anywhere. I did.
Nobody else in Mobile at that point in time.
Frazier.
Plowboy Frazier.
Plowboy Frazier.
Tiny Frazier, Giant Frazier, Plowboy Frazier. He had 75 aliases. He read the Lone Ranger when he'd lose a loser, leave town, put a mask on, come back 7 feet tall, 460 pounds, with a little Lone Ranger mask. Nobody could tell. Sweet Daddy Watts.
Yes.
You remember?
Absolutely.
Okay. But anyway, moving forward, because we were going to talk about this, we decided not to in the car so we could save it. You got in the business. You've covered some of those early years on the other interview, but you got in the business and got your first big break around the mid '80s, right at the time that we first met, and it was at Atlanta Television. We had just came from World Class from Dallas, where you were about to go, and you were in Florida. And what was the situation surrounding why you were up there at Atlanta TV, and we actually got to meet each other?
That was in '85, and that's when Eddie Graham had he committed suicide. Everybody knows. It's hard to use those words sometimes. Eddie Graham passed away. And we were there during that time, and Michael Hayes and Dutch Mantell was doing the booking, and a lot of us like to rib and say maybe that was the reason that he did it. That's for you, Michael. But anyway, what are you turning red? Why are you turning red? Why? Did I embarrass Jim Cornette?
Oh, God.
We just started, and you turned red.
Well,
maybe this is going to be good after all.
I think if Michael couldn't drive somebody to do it, Dutch probably could.
He drove me close to it a few times. Anyway, back to your original question. Everybody and their brother owned a piece of the Florida territory. Everybody. I guess if you lived in Tampa with your citizenship, you got a piece of the championship wrestling from Florida. I swear, I didn't know that. But when Eddie died, here they came. They were like vultures. They wanted to make sure that company was taken care of, you know. So the American Ring, Dusty Rhodes come in and took the book for a little while at the beginning. And I remember that vividly because he told me, Pase Pringo, you're going to be a big money ball player, if you will.
In public.
Yeah, in public. But anyway.
Hey, you were managing...
The Pringle, that was the first Pringle dynasty.
That's right.
The Missing Link. Rick Rude, Barry Horowitz, who was in Jack Hart at the time, calling himself Jack Hart. Rip Oliver, Jody Hamilton as the assassin. We had a whole Playboy Buddy Rose.
And see, this is spooky already because not only did I manage Rip Oliver in Dallas like 4 months before that, when he went to Dallas and then left and went to Florida, but also my first group when I became a manager in Memphis was the Dynasty of Champions, and you had the Pringle Dynasty.
Exactly.
And actually, we probably both stole it off the same thing, the TV show, because Dynasty was hot.
But
and everybody had stables and armies and
Sables.
You know, stables. No, not
don't say
Sable.
everybody had Sable.
We'll talk about Sable later.
I didn't know everybody had Sable. I'm sorry.
Actually, nobody wanted Sable. That's the problem. But everybody had stables and armies and things like that. So we had dynasties because we were upper crust. We were, you know,
we were old school. We were just old. That's all there is to it. But you asked me about why we came to Atlanta.
Why'd you come to Atlanta?
Because they asked us to. No, they back to the Eddie Graham passing away. Everybody came in. So the business really took a tumble when Eddie died, for obvious reasons. And everybody coming to get their piece. Wahoo come in and took the book from Dusty. Dusty wasn't there very long. He had other things in the fire, of course. He always does. And they wanted to build it up a little bit. And some of the people that were in Atlanta owned a piece of the Florida territory.
That's right.
So how can we enhance Florida a little bit? Let's bring them up to Atlanta and put them on TBS, which was always one of my dreams. I always wanted to make it to TBS, and here was my chance. Anyway, they piled us all on this old beat-up airplane that belonged to Lester Welch. Did you ever see it or hear any stories?
Yeah, I know Lester Welch, and it used to be, you talk about everybody having a piece of Florida. The Welch family, the Fullers and the Welches, one of them would have a piece of Florida and one of them have a piece of Georgia, and when one of them got tired of living in one of those areas, they just call the other one up and say, hey, can we switch? And they would switch their shares of stock in the territories and just move and take the other one's place.
Do you know how many briefcases Lester Welch had stolen out of the trunk of his car? Do you know?
Probably
I saw the piles of them. Well, they had a closet in the office in Tampa, and all the old briefcases that were stolen, they were stolen with all the houses in it.
The people should know that
that's where the briefcases were hidden.
One bag man. There was always one person designated, especially in the spot shows, to take the cash from the gate back to the office and make sure that it got deposited. And of course, in the Internal Revenue Service would be apprised fully of the situation, etc. But oftentimes, you know, being as it was back in the old days and the roads were hazardous and treacherous and filled with outlaws and vagabonds and ne'er-do-wells, many times these briefcases would be stolen between the time they left the building and before they got back to the office. And, well, you know, the money was just lost because, my God, actually there was more money lost in the wrestling business by stolen briefcases than any other reason except somebody left the back door open.
Unbelievable.
But anyway, Lester Welch, the briefcases. Come to Atlanta.
We were on Lester Welch's old beat-up plane. That's how we got off on the tangent on the briefcases. I was sitting up front with the pilot, and in the back was Wahoo McDaniel, Rick Rude, Hercules Hernandez, and it just hit me. They're all gone.
My God, that's
all three
right.
of them are gone. And Jack Hart, Barry Horowitz.
He's still here.
Jack's still alive.
And he'll never leave.
Bless his heart. But so we're on the way to Atlanta, you know, and as we're flying along, and I enjoyed the flying and sitting up front with the pilot. I was just teaching me, and I had questions and all that. So we're cruising along. We had to leave early because we had to do the TV, and all of a sudden the plane starts. Boom, boom, boom. The right engine goes out. There's a prop. Right engine goes and stops. So it's. The guy said, "Okay, we can fly on one." As soon as he said we could fly on one, number two went boom, 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 and went out. All the noise going on in the back between Wahoo snoring first of all. You know, he woke up when it got quiet. Everybody else, I think it was the prayers that was going up. But it seemed like for eternity, but we all just.
What are you just dropping now?
We all just look at each other and I was watching the pilot because my life was in his hands. And I'm watching him. What is he doing? And I can see him. He's scanning everything. And he goes, it seemed like it took a long time, but it wasn't. And he reached down and turned the switch and hit a button, and they started back. They had two gas tanks on the plane, and one gas tank ran out. and he had to
and he had to switch it over
to the other gas tank.
Ronnie Garvin, same deal with Barry Windham and Kendall Windham and oh geez,
might have been the same plane.
And Ronnie, who knows? With Ronnie, he may have bought it at a discount. There was somebody else, but several of the guys were flying from one of the spot shows in Virginia back to Charlotte, and they were starting to run out of the 2 gas tank gimmick, and 1 gas tank was starting to run out of gas. But what had happened was Ronnie was having problems with his plane, and he'd actually had the guy jump it to get it started when they left to go up to Virginia, and they landed in the cow field or whatever. So they take off and they're flying back. The alternator goes out. So Ronnie Garvin has Barry Windham holding the flashlight so he can see the instruments, right? And he's flying okay because the engine's running, but they have no lights, no radio, whatever. Well, then he's running out of gas in one tank, and he's got to switch to the other one, and he says, well, I wonder if this is an electronic fuel switch or not. Like, do they need the alternator to switch from tank A to tank B? And Barry's like, Jesus Christ! And he said, I guess we'll find out. Boom! Woo! Everything's fine. So they landed in Charlotte. No radio, couldn't call in. No lights, no landing lights, no nothing. So Garvin flies into Charlotte low, so he'll be under the radar, because if he's flying like that, they'll lose their license or whatever. So he flies like past the 28th floor of the 30-story bank building, and into Charlotte International Airport at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Nobody knew they were coming, landed, nobody knew they were there, and pulled the plane up to Butler Aviation, and all jumped out and hopped in their car and took off. And that's the way he came in, and Barry, Kendall's asleep over the corner, who knows what he's doing, and Barry's like, hey, Kendall, wake up, you'll never see Charlotte like this again.
Oh.
But anyway, so you were on...
Yeah, so we're on the way to TBS,
and you hadn't got there yet.
No, and we did. And we made it, praise the Lord, and I had my first and only appearance on TBS.
Is that the only time you ever heard that show?
Only time in all the years in the business that I was on TBS.
And that was only like the first or second week I think we were there. Cause I know it had to be the first week, because I saw you and I didn't know the difference of whether you were working the territory or not. So,
but that's why we were there, and that's how we got there, and that's the first time that we ever met face to face.
Yeah.
Although we were aware of each other's careers, long before that.
But all those years, that's the only time you ever worked Georgia TV.
Yep.
Good heavens.
That's right. And you never worked Florida.
And I never. Well, you got a chance to work for Eddie Graham, which I never got a chance to. Never even got a chance really to meet him. So that had to be a great experience.
Yeah, it was. It was a hell of a foundation, for what would follow in the later years. And although he wasn't around a lot, I would love to sit in there with him and Gordon Soley and just sit in the corner and just soak it in, like a sponge. But I remember you when you first started. I had got out of the business. I started the Percy Pringle thing in '78, and went for a few years. And I had my first child. My wife had our first child.
I was about to say, I don't remember when you were pregnant.
Although I looked like I was pregnant with several elephants, because I saw their trunks hang. Never mind. Anyway, stop it. Anyway, so I quit. And which I covered all this in the first DVD I did. I got out of the business when we went to college, so I was out of the business. I was out of the business per se, as I wasn't working, but I continued to go to the matches and everything. And that's when you were coming along. So the first time I seen you live was in the Mississippi Coliseum in Biloxi, and my little boy at that time was about 2 years.
And I had no idea you were even there.
No, you didn't know. I was sitting up, bought tickets to get in, and my oldest son, who's now 26, he was like 2 years old then. And of course, I watched wrestling all the time, and he was born in the business. And I'll never forget. He saw you all the time, and he just learned how to talk. He called you Apple Cornette. I don't know where. I brought that up, in recent years, and reminded him of it. And my wife remembers it, but I don't know where he got the apple from.
Was it because of my bulbous shape?
I don't know, but he called you Apple Cornette. But I always.
So you were sitting up there in the Mississippi Gulf Coast Coliseum, which everybody saw after Hurricane Katrina, was probably the only thing still standing in Biloxi. Was an 18,000 seat building in a 35,000 population town, and I don't know why they built a building that big, but to my knowledge, did anything ever sell that out?
Not then. I've seen things, of course, since.
Yeah, but I mean, wrestling would draw a decent crowd in Biloxi, but not 18,000 people, especially running it every 2 weeks. So much of that building would be dark. It was dangerous. It was dangerous to go to the ring, because those people, the ones that were there, 4,000 or whatever, were certainly, you know, dedicated wrestling fans, and it was dangerous. We had a lot of problems getting from the ring all the way back to the back, especially with no lights. It was just walking out in a dark room with a bunch of people that wanted to cut you.
It was built in '78, and the reason I remember because it was brand new, and that's why Frankie Kane gave me my name, Percy Pringle, in that very building, and that's where Percy was born.
Whatever happened to the original Percy Pringle? Did you ever meet him? Did you ever
know? Oh yeah, there was two.
I knew one.
And people ask me, I get emails sometimes, are you really the third Percy Pringle? I didn't know it. I swear I didn't know it when I tacked that third on the end of it, but there was two before me. There's a guy named Bobby Bass from
Outlaw Bobby Bass?
No. That's Ron Bass, right?
No, but didn't Bobby Bass work as Outlaw Bobby Bass once too?
I bet it was. I bet it was the same guy. He was a Canadian. He's from around Vancouver or something, and he used the Percy Pringle name around Kansas City, around that area there, in about 72, 73, the early 70s there.
Then he may have also been the Percy Pringle that worked in Louisville for Phil Golden's All-Star Wrestling in opposition to Jarrett in 72 and 73.
I bet it was. I'm almost certain it was. And then I'm told, although I've never seen this guy or ever met him or even seen any pictures, there was a Percy Pringle that worked in Detroit too back in the day. You know, at least.
Well, see, the first time we met, because I'd seen your name, and I said, could that be? Because I couldn't remember, because it was an Outlaw promotion in 72, 73. I was 10 years old. I couldn't remember what that Percy Pringle looked like. Right. So for a while, I wasn't sure whether it was you or not.
I get that a lot.
We met, and then, you know.
Yeah, I get some people that email me, are you the Percy Pringle? I'm not that old. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old.
Luckily, I've never been compared to anybody else, because nobody ever wanted to be me. So let's jump ahead a little bit, because you covered a lot of the earlier part of your career and the other DVD. But after Atlanta, you went to Dallas and stayed for a long time.
6 years.
You went straight from Dallas to the WWF, right?
Yes.
So you managed. You worked in the office. You were a babyface. You were a heel. You were all sorts of things.
H to Z, Bubba.
You were one of the Dallas Cowboys. You were a male stripper for some time, and then. But would you have stayed in Dallas if the Paul Bearer thing hadn't come along? I mean, what was going on at that point? It was about time to go, probably. Anyway.
You were stealing from part two.
Oh,
but that's okay.
We'll put our own spin on it.
It was the end. I mean, Jarrett and company had came in and turned it into the USWA, and it was at the end. They were pulling out and going back to Tennessee, which really never left Tennessee. They just came in every week.
Came in with a bus, right?
They came in every 2 weeks and to take what money was there, which wasn't much, enough to pay for the rental car and their apartment for Jeff Jarrett and whoever else decided to hang out there when Daddy wasn't around. I won't say anything about that. But I didn't say that. I love TNA. I'd like to work there one day. You know? No, but it was the end. In all seriously, the USWA was gone, and the global deal was getting ready to kick in, and I've done everything.
I was a part of that.
I'd done everything. I'd done everything, and it was time for me to go. And this was December of 1990, and I asked Rick Rude. You know, I called and told him that I was going back home to Mobile and get on back to the funeral business, and it was it. You know. And I'm still stealing from part two. Make a long story short, Rick said, "Don't do that. I'll get back with you." And he called me back and gave me a phone number. He said, "Write this number down." I said, "What is it?" It's Vince's home number. You know, and the rest is history. I went up there the next day. Walt came back with a contract, and
it was such perfect timing. Not trying to steal from part two, but it was such perfect timing.
We're going to steal from everybody.
We're going to steal from everybody.
It don't matter.
Eddie, if you steal from one person, it's plagiarism. From many people, it's research. They come up with the greatest gimmick of modern times, an Undertaker that needs a pallbearer and you show up a licensed mortician. That was Providence, fate, whatever.
I just done a reunion a few days ago with J.J. Dillon, and I got to sit next to him. The week before that, I got to sit next to Bobby Heenan all afternoon. This time, I got to sit next to J.J. And J.J. was very instrumental in all that. When I came up for my interview with Vince, when I went into the big board, the old Titan Towers, into where the big boardroom was, I was in there with Pat Patterson, Vince, and J.J. Dillon. And you know, Vince didn't know I was a real mortician. He was aware of my past in the business and everything, but he didn't know what my educational background was or anything. I don't think any of them probably knew. And I had a resume all typed up and everything. I never forget, he's sitting there reading it all. He has his glass down in his nose, you know the deal. And he stops. There's dead silence in the room. I was so intimidated, first of all. And he goes, "Ha, ha, you're a real mortician!" And he looks at JJ, looks at Pat, and they just go nuts.
And you have no idea.
I have no idea, and I'm scared to death. I'm afraid I'm going to do number 1, number 2 on myself, you know. I go, well, I guess it's over before I even get started. What's going on here? And he goes, ha, 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 he's a real mortician. Ha, 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 you know, Pat, ha, ha, ha. You know, they never told me. I never knew. I knew I left for the contract, but we'll call you in a couple of weeks. In a couple of weeks, the call came. It was JJ, and I had to tell JJ this a couple of days ago. I said, JJ, you was the one that called me. He said, well, Vince has decided we're going to call you Paul Bearer, and we want your hair black, we want your mustache black if you're going to keep that, and black suits, you're going to look like a mortician. And they took the mortician gimmick, my wrestling gimmick, and put it together, and Paul Bearer was born.
And that had to be fate of some description, that you would walk in at that particular time when they were fixing to debut the biggest gimmick of the past 15 years.
People that have watched my interviews, they're sick of hearing me say blessing. I say blessing a lot. Blessed, blessed, blessed. I'm blessed. There's no other word to describe it. Right place, right time, and I was blessed. Okay, there's no other word. I have to say it, you know.
And I love the promos you used to do against Mark after a while, also where you call him rigor mortis. It's just the whole. You have the demeanor of the classic funeral parlor person. You know,
it was just a natural thing. There's a kid that works here for the Ring of Honor that I've been talking to this morning. They had to pull me out of there to come in here. What a fan he is of the Undertaker and of that era, and he remembered everything. Dates, times. He knew what time that I said, oh yes, you know. This guy knows it all. And I was just sitting there, I can't remember specific dates. I can remember, you know, what the WrestleManias were, but this guy knows it all. The years just go. But
so you went from Dallas working with Eric Embry to WWF working with the Undertaker. And let me ask you about Eric Embry. Tell me some Eric Embry stories. He had unbelievable talent for getting his pasty white, non-athletic body as over with whatever audience was watching as anybody I've ever seen. For anybody who's never seen Eric Embry, bleach, he's Cloverport, Kentucky boy, bleach blonde, pasty white skin, no discernible muscles at all, no definition, no physique. Okay worker, okay talker, had kind of an annoying voice, but for whatever minuscule amount of fans was watching any given promotion, he could get himself over with those people. He might not be able to draw any new ones in, but he could get himself over in some respect with those people. It was amazing that people could buy into him. Tell me some Eric.
It was just another case of the right time and right place again. You know, we went through all the tragedies, the binary tragedies, but we don't have to rehash those. We've talked about them before, and everybody else had too. But all the tragedies, the company was closing down, and Jared had come in. And here was Eric. I had never met him before. I'd heard of him before, you know, when he had tagged with Ken Timms as a fabulous blonde and stuff. He had been in San Antonio, that Southeastern wrestling they had there for a few years there, and I had never met him face to face. But another case of right time, right place. He looked like the old traditional, old school wrestler. It was boots, tights, and that was it. And the beer belly, and the dip in the mouth, and what you see is what you got with Eric. And I think, I've tried to analyze it a few times. I guess it was just the people I just identified with it. Because if you look out into the crowd, that's what you see.
Yeah.
The beer bellies,
there you go.
And the dips in the mouth, and that was our audience.
And also
and some of the women too.
When Eric had the book, also
you know, I just beat you to the punch.
Yeah, the old interview material.
The kids look like that. They were dipping.
But when Eric had the book, he would overcome 72 heels. He would nip up out of everything. He would be shot with a machine gun and somehow manage to crawl to the corner and survive.
And they bought it.
Yes. And I would watch the shows and I would marvel at your stuff, but I'd watch the shows and I'd marvel at Eric Embry.
Eric lived in the Sportitorium. No.
And slept in Kim Mantell's old office or what?
Everywhere. Everywhere in that building. And And oh my God, there was rats that crawled through the rafters, you know, and the maintenance man
as big as house
used to shoot them with shotguns. I've seen him. He'd sit out there with a gun, and I had an office there. I'd get there early sometimes, and there he'd be sitting out there with a shotgun. What are you doing with a shotgun? I figured he was thinking looters or somebody was coming in, shooting at rats. What?
Oh, Ken Mantell and David Manning would take 22s out, and they'd flip the lights on real quick, and they'd shoot at them when they would run.
They were huge.
I stood in Fritz's office one day, and I looking at Ken Mantell's behind a desk or whatever. I looked up at a knothole. I thought I saw the knothole looking back at me.
That might have been a real rat.
It had, no,
that might have been one of.
They were all downstairs.
No, there were some rats. Some of them were tied. Do you want to hear those kind of stories?
Sure, let's go.
No, some of them have gotten into the business.
Oh, well, maybe
some of them still are.
Oh.
Okay, just find the list of who was there when I was there and put two and two together and you figure who they are.
Do your own math, folks. We're getting late. We'll move on. But no,
I saw a rat hanging out of the window at the Sportitorium, looking out of the parking lot, just screaming, "Oh, a rat!" Do you understand what I'm saying? And then never mind. You're turning red again. You're turning red, James. Oh, I'm proud of myself.
Oh yeah.
But wait till he turns me red. But you had the concession stand, right?
Oh yeah, tell a concession stand story. You do it so well because they had the best French fries. The Sportitorium had the concession stand had the best French fries.
Everything was good there. The food was just fabulous. But you know, finally, when Fritz was there, Fritz was God, and you know that. You worked for him.
Absolutely.
And he could do no wrong as far as being. He could run for governor of Texas and won.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
Certainly. Mayor of Dallas,
anything, and he had so many strings, and such a businessman, and everybody was so respected there, and nobody came to the Sportitorium to inspect it. You know, the health department didn't come to check on Fritz Von Erich, please. They were worried about the down the street, you know.
Fritz Von Erich told the FBI what to do.
Exactly, nobody was checking up on Fritz, so. Of course, the people that ran the concession stand, they got by with a lot of things. The French fries were so good because that grease was there for a long time. I don't know how long, but it was there. I know when they drained that grease, I was there. And my friend, there was bones in there.
The rats would walk across the water pipes, the steam pipes, and they'd take the bump and
slip on some of the grease that had condensed on the pipes.
And they'd never be able to nip up again.
And they fell into the grease, and that's where they stayed. I don't tell them how long they were there, and there could have been.
What do you think? 5 years?
There could. Oh, I'm sure it was several years. Easy. And there probably was other bones in there besides, you know, rat bones. You know, it might have been two-legged rat bones in there too. You just never know. I went there with her. You know. Next, and there'd be another one outside the door.
I had one jump on me one night.
Or what do you want? Two-legged or
four-legged?
Okay.
Four-legged. Out of one of those ceiling fans in the locker room. But the Sportitorium, it was a great. But what an atmosphere! What an atmosphere! The people were fueled on French fries and rat bones and ready to see wrestling.
And I wish that I was talented enough and had the vocabulary to tell the people that have never been there and never experienced that venue, that room there. I just can't. You can't tell anybody about it unless you had to experience it for yourself. And I know you agree. We wrestled all over the world. From everywhere, from India to Paducah, Kentucky, to you know the deal. But the Sportitorium in Dallas, there was just something about it. It just, I miss it. I love it. When they tore it down, I wasn't there when they tore it down. I'm kind of glad I wasn't because I'm sure it would have been like going to a funeral. I'm sure I would have cried. And when I heard about it,
it was the building with 9 lives that lived through everything. The outlaw promoter had tried to burn it down 50 years ago or whatever, and that's why it had the one flat wall because they just put a tin wall up where half the building had burned. And there was some type of chamber underneath the ring. You know that?
Oh, I know about it.
When Pedicino was doing Global, he kept the same old Sportitorium ring, and I said, my God, the thing's mildewed. Every time somebody takes a bump, you start coughing because the mildew would come up, and also the ring posts, it was hard as a rock, just like that floor, and the ring posts were screwed into the ground. And then it never came down for years, so it had settled and was so hard. And I told Pedicino, I said, get a new ring. Get that thing out of there, get a new ring. He said, I've had them look at it, and they say that it's bolted into something under the ground, but that there's a chamber underneath the ring of some kind.
Of course, it was like a pit.
Yeah.
It was like a pit all the way around, concrete. And when they cleaned it, they had fire hoses. And they would, and it started at the top and wash everything down under the ring into this pit. And, you know,
that went somewhere.
And
who knows? Maybe it was the Underground Railroad.
And I'm sure there were some rats under there too. All kinds.
So, we're just
gonna keep headbutting.
We're gonna keep headbutting. Let's leave Dallas for a little while.
I hate to leave Dallas. Go ahead.
We got new fish to fry. The first time that
new grease.
The first time that we got to work with each other was the Royal Rumble '94 or what? Well, we did house shows before that. Did we do a paper? No, Survivor Series '93 was the one with Yoko and the Undertaker.
When Undertaker died.
When that was the Royal Rumble.
Okay.
So we had a match at Survivor Series in San Antonio.
Okay.
I think.
You're the one with the brain, not me.
But anyway.
Jimmy the Brain Cornette.
Oh, gee, no.
Sorry, Bobby.
Bobby, please no. When I come up to manage Yokozuna, which was June of '93, the first thing was Luger. We got past that, and then it was Yoko and Undertaker. And I thought those were Yokozuna's best matches. I really did.
Where did Fuji go then?
He stayed.
So
nobody noticed. Remember? Yeah. God bless
you and Fuji?
Yeah.
I guess so.
But see, sometimes Fuji was slow getting to the ring, so the match would be half over by the time he got there.
Bless his heart.
Bless him. His bad knees.
Bless his heart.
But, the thing is, the world champion at that time, had WWF champion, had a manager that couldn't really speak English that well, so that sort of didn't translate. And Yoko's gimmick was that he didn't do interviews, and who says I don't draw flies? So they had to find somebody, so I was elected. But I thought that Yoko's best matches were with Taker. That whole run, because Taker knew how to work with him. He was a big guy, but he could still move. He was still fast. He kept the pace up.
Yeah, Taker could work with everybody except Giant Gonzalez.
Yeah, that was a hopeless cause. But I really enjoyed those matches. I enjoyed us getting a chance to promo against each other.
Yes.
And of course, we couldn't do much interfering because what am I going to do to the Undertaker? What are you going to do to Yoko? So we mostly would sit there and point at each other, but they were good promos. But the thing, I remember the entrance. That's why Survivor Series '93 sticks out in my mind in San Antonio because it's a huge building, and the Royal Rumble also. When the lights would go out, and the lightning would flash, and the bong, and the music would go, I'd get bumps on that. Just goosebumps.
I did too every night. Every night. It never ended.
And the only way you were coming to the ring with him, we were standing there about to get our ass kicked by him. It was, it was even more fun.
No, I was on the other side of the fence too there for a while.
Well, that's true.
So I know what you're talking about. But that entrance is just...
It was the greatest entrance in wrestling.
34 years from now, fans will still be talking about, I remember when you talk about the Undertaker.
And you know what? He was so special because I always feel like you can't over gimmick or elsewise. If everything's a gimmick, you have no gimmicks. But he was the one guy who needed to have a gimmick. He was the one guy who could be the something. The Undertaker or the this or the that. If you got one the, it needed to be a guy like that because he worked the gimmick to perfection, and it was, I hate cartoon wrestling, but I loved the Undertaker because it was over. It was special. And, like I said, the entrance would send chills and shivers down your spine. But what was it like trying to just keep up with this when the whole Undertaker thing got over, and you had to switch babyface, which was,
the fans knew that.
Yeah. And then they went ahead and went with it, but now you're a babyface manager, which is always tough.
We did not change.
You didn't change anything.
Nothing changed.
But the problem was now you're on the other side of the heels and the heel managers, and you got to figure out a way to keep yourself busy without getting buried, and that's tough.
Yes, it was, and they all had instructions: don't touch, don't touch Percy, and they didn't touch me.
I appreciate you always returning the favor for me. We were two of the most unphysical.
When did Smoky Mountain come in there? Did me and Taker go down?
That was in '95. That was 95.
After then.
Yeah, it was after that because
that's when we met Glenn Jacobs.
Yes.
For the first time.
Yes.
That's my son, the fruit of my loins, if you will.
It was April '95 that you came to Pikeville and did the Bluegrass Brawl, and I was a babyface at that point for briefly, so we got to work together and manage the Undertaker and Bob Armstrong and Tracy Smothers in a 6-man, and then you came down in August. It was August of '94. That's when. August '95. You met Glenn Jacobs. Because that's
I have a picture on the wall of my office at home that of me and you at ringside from that time, and you autographed it to me. It said, "To Paul Bearer from your next client."
Yeah.
Thank God that hasn't happened.
What did you see when you first saw Glenn Jacobs Kane, who was Unabomb then? I mean, everybody saw it, that he was the next big thing. But what did you see specifically?
It was that proverbial it, that we all talk about. He has it.
And his work wasn't that good then. And I think Glenn will say that. But he's still
his
just
size and just his personality. One of the nicest guys ever, Well,
and now
too nice.
Everybody was, he's big. He's big. How bad can he be? He's big. You can be really bad. If you're really big and you're really bad, you can be really bad. You can stink if you're big still. But Glenn was almost 7 feet tall and great body, but at the same time he could move around. And he's like a puppy with big paws. You knew he was going to grow into it. And we've seen so many people, we could tell the difference between a guy who is just big and going to plod along and not really go anywhere, and a guy who was big and really could move in the ring and was taken to it and was getting better. And everybody saw that in Glenn, and so, I guess I had him like 6 months and he was gone, but he went on to greener pastures.
Oh, we ran back to the Vince, you've got to see this guy.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks
Mark worked with him, and
that's why I booked the match.
He's got it. So, they sent him to school real quick, and he became a dentist.
Yeah.
Right? Didn't he become a dentist?
Yeah, Dr. Isaac
Yankum.
On your teeth? Yeah, and you can also have it and lose part of it. But if
he found it again,
and then fake diesel.
Exactly, we're headed that way.
But the third time's the charm.
He was my son. Oh, and I'm so proud of him.
Okay, is there a genealogy tree or a lineage path or whatever? You've been Kane's father, his brother, his sister, Undertaker's father. Undertaker and Kane have been brothers, half brothers, step brothers, the Christian brothers. Brooks Brothers.
I told this story one time before, and I'm not trying to sell it, certainly not. Yes, maybe I am trying to sell them because I get residuals from it. The new History of the Undertaker DVD that just was recently released.
Oh, yeah.
This is on there. I was sitting in the locker room with Jerry Lawler, and just like we are right now, and Jerry says, "Percy," he says, "tell me, what was it like the night you and Taker's mama did the nasty, And I was just a kid. I was working at the Taker's mom and daddy's funeral home. I was an apprentice mortician at the funeral home there for the Undertaker. Paul Bearer was, And I was sitting in the kitchen late one night.
So she was like Mrs. Robinson.
Yeah, the old man was out there. The Undertaker, little Marky, the Callaway back in those days, he wasn't but about 7 or 8 years old. He was just a baby. And the old man, Undertaker, he was out of town on a funeral convention or something, and I was alone in the funeral home with, which I'd been many times, with Undertaker's mother. And I just finished embalming the bodies about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. We're sitting there.
She had nothing else to do.
She was in her house coat and had her hair up in rollers and stuff, and sitting there having a bologna sandwich, and she started moving over closer to me.
Bologna and embalming fluid.
Yeah, exactly.
I can hear my stomach rumbling already.
You just don't know until you've tried it. You just don't know. There's nothing like a cold one at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not talking about beer either. She wasn't cold. She warmed up after a while.
Oh, that's
but anyway, she slid on over next to me and put her arms around me, and things started going. In fact, as I said, if you see that interview, poor Miss Undertaker, she had one foot was in L.A. and one was in Helena. And all of a sudden, I hear some feet coming down the stairs. Here comes little Undertaker running downstairs. Mama, Mama, Mama! And he stopped it down, and what a sight he saw. And next thing you know, 9 months later, here come baby Kane. So that's how Kane was conceived. I mean, she took my cherry. I was just a young, I went to church every weekend. I was just a young man, 18 years old. I was fresh as a daisy, didn't know nothing about it. That woman molested me, took my cherry, took the fruit of my loins, and delivered Kane. And then he got burnt on the fire. And I got all the heat from it, and Taker's the one that burnt the place down.
Well, now that's another thing.
Yes.
He found out all along it was Undertaker.
It was him. He
caused that fire.
That's all right. I had to take...
But for years you were blamed.
I took the heat. That was fine. I was getting a good paycheck for taking that heat. That's fine. I even went out and dug up old man Undertaker and old lady Undertaker and dug their bodies up and brought them out And Kane slammed Taker into the casket. Where's his mama's casket? Bless her heart, but she still had a smile on her face, and I think I know why. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, in all seriousness after that.
Seriousness.
The Buried Alive match, which was a classic gimmick match, I thought, for Undertaker. I enjoyed those, actually, because it was somewhat preposterous, but yet at the same time it was cool because it was Undertaker. I always gave Undertaker a lot of leeway in my mind that he could get away with stuff that nobody else could get away with.
Absolutely.
The Buried Alive match was great. The Hell in a Cell match was great, but do you think, as not only Undertaker started trying to reinvent himself in the late 90s, but also the family lineage stories got more convoluted, do you think, did that take the edge off of him for a while till he got refocused?
Sure. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, because I think people started, it was hard for him to keep track of what the heck was going on. Yeah.
Like I was talking about the young man earlier I was speaking to. He put some things in perspective for me. But I'm confused. It confused me. And if I'm confused and I'm part of the deal, how the fans feel about it all? Because writers would leave, writers would come and go. The Hollywood writers come in, Vince Russo come in, and then and then, gosh, and unfortunately, I was lucky that my stuff and Taker's stuff really was never scripted. You know, and the interviews that we did, it was never scripted.
And he was lucky he had the pull, the wherewithal to veto something like that if it would happen anyway, because that's, to me, the Undertaker was one of the golden geese, one of the grand golden geese. Undertaker, Austin, Rock, Foley at that point in time, and that was starting to take the edge off Taker. And I think finally he got it back when, you know, I think the less is more thing. With it, when they started trying to change the outfits and bring the motorcycle in and all the other stuff, I think when he got back to what they wanted to see, which was a new twist on the old dead man, I think that's when he finally got the stroke back and got
and
things.
They still want to see that original. I get it all the time. When we came back at WrestleMania 20, you know, they thought they were going to get to see the original dead man, which they did, and they got to see a little bit. And
it's kind of a new twist on the old.
They still want to see the old original purple gloves, the gray boot covers, and they still want that. And I hear it all the time. Do you ever think he's going to do that? Do you? And I think before he retires, if and when he decides to retire, I don't know when it's possible would be, that we'll see that before it's all said and done. That might be the last picture you see of him.
It's got to be resurrected.
That might be the last picture you see. Is the first thing that you saw of that character, and I'm getting goosebumps. And I still get them, so that means it's good.
Now, was the concrete cold when you were slabbed?
Oh, it was horrible.
Were you the first person ever assassinated on live pay-per-view?
I wasn't killed though. They never killed anybody on WWF.
That's right. They don't do murder or rape.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, they didn't kill me.
So you were just submerged in a concrete block and solidified there.
They got me out. At
a later date off the air, you were gotten out and sent to the Federal Witness Protection Program.
As soon as the pay-per-view was off the air, the paramedics got me out and was sucking concrete out of my bodily orifices and rushing me to the hospital. And I had to stay in the hospital for a while, but I kicked out. You know, Paul Bearer's not dead, and as long as there's an Undertaker and a Kane, Paul Bearer's never going to be dead. And as long as there's fans out there that enjoyed what we've done through the years, Paul Bearer's never going to die.
Well, you know, actually, it would be even spookier now if you came back after all that they've done to you. You could resurrect yourself and have even more.
Yeah, have a Q-tip, concrete coming out of my ears, and
sneeze and gravel will fly. What were you doing? Okay. Let's go back a little bit. I don't want to take off a part two, but in the last few years, you had taken a year away from the business, try to get your passion back for it. As I know what you go through sometimes when you do this and you have a passion for it and you do it day in and day out for so long, sooner or later you just hit the wall and you just want to get away from it for a while. But you came back for WrestleMania 20 and you were back for about 3 months. That's after also talk about your weight loss. You had your surgery and your weight loss, which has been dramatic. So you were back about 3 months, and then you started working behind the snes. You came down to OVW some. You were on the gorilla position a little bit.
Then.
But that's right. Yeah. That was right before that.
To kind of put things in perspective, what happened? My wife got breast cancer, and in 2000. It was either 2000 or 2001. I'm so bad on dates. And she had to have the surgery and the radiation and the chemotherapy and all that. And Vince, Percy, go home and take care of your wife. And of course they continued to pay me all that time. But I got to sit with my wife, and I had to be there. Yeah. And hold her hand through all of those 36, radiation treatments and those chemotherapies that made her sick. And I thought I was going to lose her. I really did. And thank the good Lord above that things have worked out. She's cancer-free today. But Vince had sent me home during all that. That's when the American Badass stuff was starting out. So they didn't want to, get rid of me. They treated me well. They really did, and they still do. And they gave me an opportunity to do other things. Of course, Taker couldn't put my fat ass in a sidecar of that Harley and ride me down to the ring.
Sergeant Schultz and Colonel
exactly.
Clint coming out, right?
Picture that, here comes the American Badass with Fatty Arbuckle, in the sidecar. So that didn't work. So Percy was going to find something else to do. You've been in the business for blah, blah number of years, and you could be valuable in other areas. And so they gave me the opportunity to do that. They gave me the opportunity to work at the gorilla position. Now, for those of you a lot of you might know what the gorilla position is, and at the top of the ramp, there's a curtain. Right behind the curtain is this a control room, basically is what you would call it, where a stage manager, more or less, would sit there.
Monitor, headsets, what's going on in the show. This is the last place to go before you go out.
Important job, because you were really the middleman between the ring, what was going on in the ring, and the production truck, as far as the timing and everything. And it was your job to time the show. They would tell you, after they had the thousands of meetings and tore up the thousands of scripts and over and over again, finally, 5 minutes before the show went on, it would be, Percy, the show's going to go, whatever, let's say 58 minutes is out of the blue, So I had 58 minutes, so I had to take the matches and go to each one of the matches. How much time do y'all need? My God.
Yeah.
I'm preaching to the crowd with you.
Yeah.
Now, how much can we have? How much can we steal from somebody else?
They're either going to say 2 minutes or 20 minutes. Yeah. Never anything in between. They either want to get in and get out or stay forever.
And there were some that never went home when you told them to.
No.
Never. And some would go home early. But you have to understand, each second was worth so much money. It was so valuable. And editing time, or the live shows, it was really critical, because you had to go off at that time. The tape shows was a little bit different, but you had to make sure that they went, and if they didn't go home, it was my fault.
Oh, yeah.
If they didn't go home.
If you didn't go out there and chase them out with a baseball bat, it was your fault.
Because I had Vince in one ear, and I had Kevin Dunn out of the truck.
Our friend.
And he's such a sweetheart.
Just a wonderful person.
If you've never seen Kevin, I know you see the names, you heard the name before, seen it. I would think I'd take Alvin the Chipmunk, or maybe in Caddyshack, the little gopher,
Bucky Beaver,
that stuck his head out of the thing,
Yeah.
And he would eat constantly, and he'd be talking like a damn beaver, and that's what he looks like. And yes, you do look like a beaver. I don't apologize, it ain't my fault. I look like shit myself.
If I made that much money as Kevin Dunn does, I'd get my teeth fixed.
Exactly.
Get your teeth fixed, pal. I've always wanted to tell you that.
I
hate your guts. You hate wrestling. I hate you. But anyway, nevertheless.
It was the most pressure. I've never had a job in any aspect of the business that I've been associated with than that job there, the gorilla position. The pressure was just... it was just all the time, and
you have people coming at you from every direction.
And my wife was still fighting the cancer thing, and it was just, and it wasn't me, Jimmy. It's not, and you know me. It's not me. I wasn't meant to be that backstage man, to be the agent, to be the stooge type of deal. That's when you brought the OVW gimmick there. When the gorilla position didn't work out, I was going to the meetings that they would have before TV and everything. So then they had the position open up where we had the farm territories, of course, which we were a very important part of, the OVW. And Les Thatcher had the Heartland in Cincinnati, and Bassman in L.A., and Golden in Memphis.
Yeah.
And Savio Vega had a little bit going in Puerto Rico. So there was 5 of them.
Golly, you know what? The only one, I just realized, the only one that actually survived more than about a year and a half was OVW.
Exactly.
Could we have done something right? Evidently not, to hear them tell it. But anyway, go ahead.
Exactly. And I'll never forget the first time. So what I got to do, I got to travel around, and it was fantastic. One of the best gigs I ever had. Besides sitting at home getting paid, It was the best gig that I had.
Best actual work.
I had no boss over me or anything, and I just traveled around from each one of those territories, from your place to Les's, to Memphis, to Puerto Rico, and to L.A., and I made my own flights, and I'd done my own thing, but I was a stooge, you know. They sent me in there to see what y'all were doing. Watch Jimmy.
Yeah.
Watch him, Percy. Percy. Watch Jimmy. Watch him.
Keep it on.
Watch Danny Davis. You know, watch some boys down there. We paint them every week. What they're doing there? That's not mean. And so it lasted for a few months, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because
you're used to being one of the people that gets told on, not one of the people that tells on people.
Exactly. And I enjoyed it from the fact that I got to travel around and see everybody and visit with you, you know, and dear Kenny Bolin there, you know, a couple times a month or so.
Who is now officially the world's largest wrestling manager now that you've lost weight.
It feels so good. But anyway, they gave me other things to do, and I hated it. It just wasn't me. So my contract came up for renewal, and I had a serious heart-to-heart with me and my wife and everything. I wasn't happy anymore. I was hating the business that I was born to be in, of course, obviously, and I love and have such a passion for it, which you do, and I started hating it. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go to the airports. And that's what I loved to do, and I hated it. And so Percy, we'll find you something else to do. And that's when I had to make the decision. It's time to walk. It's time to walk. And I'm sorry. I need to go. I really do. At that point, I had been there, say, probably about 12 years, I guess. You know.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of managers that have worked for Vince. Not even Bobby Heenan or J.J. Dillon in a managerial position.
Yeah, going all the way back to Wizard and Albano.
That have been there straight.
That have been there forever.
For, you know, my contract, my talent contract just expired 2 months ago, you know, in July, or 3 months ago. And to have been paid by that company as a manager for almost 14 straight years. And which I was so blessed, I use that word again, blessed to do, because it truly was a blessing, and mainly thanks to the Undertaker. Because Taker's the one that kept me there, you know, most of the time. When nobody else, when they wanted to bury me in concrete, when that angle first came up, Taker done everything. I didn't find out a lot of this stuff till later, after the fact. Taker done everything he could to stop that. And not just Taker, everybody. Bruce Pritchard, and I can sit here and just name names. Nobody liked it. Even the people that didn't like me, thank God there wasn't a lot. But there's like Kevin Dunn. I'm sure like Kevin Dunn was back there with a big oar. Yeah. We're gonna pee in Percy's concrete. You know?
He already had the quickcrete all mixed up.
Exactly. Exactly. That was the deal there. But
God, he's a lovely person. Love him. Just love him.
Oh,
think about him.
I wish he was here with us.
Who do I?
But I done forgot what the hell we was talking about.
Oh, well, we got to the point where actually you were burnt out, tired, hating the business.
So I went home, and that's when I put on so much weight. I was so depressed. You know, and here I can sit here and make up excuses, and point fingers, but you know, an old timer told me a long time ago, Percy, when you point a finger at somebody, you point three back at yourself. So I guess, you know, if I had took care of myself like I should have, it probably would have never happened. It would have never happened. My oldest son and his wife, we lost our first grandchild, you know, and it was hard for them. It was, you know, kids just aren't meant to watch their kids bury their kids. And I don't think the Lord created us that way. And for me and my wife to have to stand back and watch our son, you know, bury their baby, it takes a lot of you. It breaks your heart. And just all the tragedy. We were losing friends left and right, you know. And it just wasn't good. And I just let my mind just go, and I just ballooned. And Jeff and Jerry Jarrett brought me up to TNA during that time for a couple of months, and I was just had to put on so much weight. I was over 400, way over 400 pounds.
And let's face it, you've always been predisposed to be heavy anyway.
Exactly.
You know, your whole life.
And they tried to do something, you know, to help me out there, and my health just wouldn't allow it, and they knew it, and so we had to part ways there too. But my weight has always been a constant battle all my life. And I never talked about, I always talk about, oh, the good times in the WWF, good times in the WWF. There was a lot of bad times that, you know, that I don't talk about. And mainly because I was criticized constantly and ridiculed about my weight all the time. You know how the boys are.
Yeah.
they're my friends, and the guys that I love to death and everything. They still, I guess some of them think maybe we'll just kind of mention it to him and slide away. But like Vince, you know, they had the buffets, you know, before the shows, you know, where all the boys would sit and eat before we do the TV taping because you were there all day. And I got to a point where I couldn't eat in front of the boys or Vince. It got that bad because Vince would walk. I swear to God, this is the gospel truth. It never failed. I don't know if Taker set me up many times with Vince. I can talk about some of those ribs too. But I swear this happened. If it happened 10 times, it happened 1,000. Where somebody, whoever it was, would hand me a piece of chocolate cake. And I swear to God, every time that cake sat in front of me, Vince walked through the door. So it had to be worked. And finally, it had to be set up, you know. But
you got over me one day. If you remember, I think it was probably Vader, his ballooning weight, that instituted the weigh-in business. The weigh-in business, and they even had the special scale with the extra balance on it because Vader would go up over 400, and they wanted him under. But then somebody gets the bright idea, they're going to rib you, mess with you, and you have to weigh in too. And you said, and rightfully so, I'm a manager. What my weight is doesn't have anything to do with my promo. And if you want me to weigh in, then instead of weighing in, I'll weigh out and I'll go home. So pick and
that was in Chicago.
Didn't have to weigh in.
That was in Chicago at the Rosemont Horizon. I remember that vividly. Jim Ross, we had a meeting. Jim Ross was up there, and Jim was always, you know, God, I was fat. I mean, my God, I worked for years over at 400 pounds and 400 pounds plus. But Jim Ross was, oh, I'm fat too. Please, you're nothing. My God, but ha ha ha. Me and Percy are going to weigh in too and get a chuckle. And that's what did it. After all the boys left and everything, I went up to Jim. I said, I don't see a damn thing funny about any of this. There's no chuckle at all about weighing over 400 pounds. There's nothing funny about it at all. And I'm not going to do it. And I walked out, and I was going to leave. And they sent Jerry Briscoe out, which, you know, to kind of soothe my, it's okay, I talked to Vince, and he's not going to make you weigh in, you know. But there was that weight thing was something else. And Taker used to set me, they used to get a big high, and I knew I was being set up a lot of times, and I can tell a lot of those stories too if you want to hear them.
So it was about this time your weight had really got to be an issue, and you got a call to come back. But at that point, you didn't feel like you could or you should.
It was impossible, Jimmy. I mean, it was August 2003. The phone, you know, rang one day, and you know, if anybody knows, you know, you look on your caller ID and it would say Stamford, Connecticut. you would get sick. You would get sick, and you would get sick because they call all the names. Just when you thought you had time off or a weekend off, Stamford, Connecticut. It was all the damn time, you know. We were getting paid well for it. Anyway, deal. Stamford, Connecticut called. Of course, I didn't answer it. So I checked the message, and it was JR. Percy, we've got an idea for you. It's going to involve you and the Undertaker at WrestleMania 20. You know, we got about 6 months before we get there, 7 months at that time, and we want to talk to you about it. So as I was already depressed, I already put on the weight, I already had the personal problems and everything, so when I played that message back and listened to it, you know, it was just throw gasoline on me and throw the match on me, because I weighed 525 pounds. I couldn't walk out in my front yard and get the newspaper or the mail, and I was dying, and I was dying. There's no other word to describe it. And I was so ashamed, you know, that I couldn't talk to JR and tell him that. And he didn't leave off. He called. He called several more times, and they know me so well that something had to be wrong because I wasn't returning their calls. Here's my chance to come back with Taker, WrestleMania 20. Why isn't Percy calling us back? He sure ain't doing nothing else for anybody else, you know. So I didn't return the calls, and then he followed up with an email about a week or so later, and then I felt comfortable there because I could hide behind the computer keyboard, and they couldn't see me. And I told him my health just wouldn't allow it, He said, well, but we'd like to talk to you. So I called him. And I said, Jim, my health just won't allow it. I put on so much weight. And first thing he said was, Percy, what can we do for you? What can we do to help you? I said, well, I've been researching this gastric bypass surgery, and my doctor seems to think that that's the only thing that's going to save my life. And of course, I don't have any insurance or, you know, a little bit more chit chat. He says, well, let me talk to Vince, and I'll get back to you. And it was like the next day he called and says, here's the deal. We're going to send you a new contract, a new 3-year contract for X amount of dollars downside. And as a signing bonus, we're going to help you pay for your gastric bypass surgery. So I'm looking at the calendar now, and the gastric bypass surgery, you know, I'm going to go into this in more detail in the part 2 of my personal shoot interview, because this is a very, very critical part of my entire life, not just my career. But it's not a thing that you can walk into the 7-Eleven and ask Rashid or whoever it is behind the counter, I want one of those gastric bypass surgeries.
Yeah, give me a gastric bypass
exactly,
and a big gulp.
Exactly, to go. To go. And some of those Oreo cookies, a 6-pack. But you just don't do that. It's you know, a lot of people that's never had a weight problem, you know, they can't understand it. You know, well, just push yourself away from the table and start working out. It's not like that. If you haven't walked in somebody's shoes that's suffered from obesity, and I was what they called, I wasn't morbidly obese. I was categorized as super morbidly obese, where
Supersize it.
Exactly. That's what my casket was going to be. I was going to be in a piano case without a doubt. You know, I was like one of the McGuire twins, and it's not funny. I like to make light about it, but it wasn't funny. I was dying, you know. So, long story short, I had to watch the calendar real close because I knew I had to be in Madison Square Garden for WrestleMania 20. So the operation was a success, in which I'll go into more details later. And I was losing weight real quick, a pound a day, you know, sometimes more than a pound a day, and it just completely drains you. You're so weak because you're losing so much weight, and your plumbing is all new. Your stomach's so small, you can't take in enough nourishment, you know, to give you that energy to go.
Right.
But I made sure I was at WrestleMania, and I had lost like about 140 pounds by the time WrestleMania had rolled around. But they saved my life. I say they, who's they? They is McMahon and Company.
Yeah, it's always who's they?
So,
explain they.
Hey, Jimmy understand what I'm talking about. But anytime, if you're talking to Vince or somebody in the office and you say, well, they told me to, who's they? It's always they. Don't ever say they. You know, say who it is, like Kevin Dunn. Just say they, you know. I don't know why Kevin Dunn never got sued for him right now, girls out there, listen to me. You know, if you heard him in that truck, all the stuff that he says on the headsets.
I can't understand it because it's coming through those big front teeth on that ugly face of his.
How he treats. I've been wanting to get this off my chest for so many years.
Preach, brother, preach.
Oh, glory. Kevin Dunn, I hate you. And you hate me. Vince wanted me, as part of that gorilla position shit, he wanted me to go out into the ring truck and learn their part of the ring truck, too. That way I would know what was going on. When I was trying to hook the ring and the ring truck together, Kevin Dunn didn't want me in that ring truck. He would always have a damn excuse why I couldn't go in that sacred tabernacle, the holy ring truck.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
Put your hands on the radio.
This was, first, you been out in the ring truck yet?
You know why it was? It was because you might say the word wrestling in conjunction with a wrestling show. You might utter that dirty, filthy, obscene word wrestling that he hates so much, despite the fact that every penny Kevin Dunn has made, and there are a lot of pennies in that job, by the way, and all the money that's bought his house and all the money that supports his family is made from the wrestling business. He refuses to admit he's in it and tries to impart into his employees a hatred of anything involving professional wrestling because he is embarrassed because he thinks that one of these days he'll win a television Emmy as a big major television producer when in fact as a television producer he'd make a better television repairman. But not that I really thought about that at all. But anyway.
I feel like I just lost 30 more pounds. I've been harboring this hate. And seriously, I swear, Jimmy, I swear, and you know me, I can't...
You don't hate a lot of people.
No, I don't.
But when you do it well.
Exactly, and I swear, I can't sit here and name probably people, on one hand, the people that I truly hate or had heat with in the business, and I've always hated Kevin Dunn. And obviously he hated me.
He's one of the biggest enemies of professional wrestling that the folks don't even know about because of his influence involved with the television. He's one of the biggest enemies of professional wrestling and wrestling fans that exists anywhere because he is embarrassed by being involved in wrestling and so he chooses to pretend that he is not in the wrestling business and doesn't want to have anything to do with it. And if you say the word wrestling on his program, he'll make you go back and redo it.
And I know that.
Even though it ain't ballet, and it's not the Harlem Globetrotters.
And he was a thorn on my side there.
He's a pain in my ass.
Exactly. It was a little bit lower. But when they done the Tough Enough deal, you know, the Tough Enough reality show thing that they
well,
did.
that was
he was in charge of all that.
Yeah, Kevin pushed that.
Did you ever see
that would cause people to know that somebody off the street can become a great superstar wrestler in no time because it doesn't take any effort.
But they had people establish talent on the show, this and that and the other, like Bob Holly kicking somebody's ass or something like that. But did you ever see a manager that had been in with the company for 12, 13 plus years on that show? No. We can't hear pussy on there, Kevin done.
Well, here's another problem. You're from the South.
Yeah.
See, that's why that Jim Ross and I were a bad announce team.
Yes.
Because even though everybody said that we were the best team maybe that they'd ever had do Superstars, or that we did a wonderful job on so-and-so, we're both from the South. And we have these pronounced Southern accents. Both JR and I do. Now, if you're watching in Maine, maybe yes, but there are other people, except those people involved in New York City, Kevin. And so JR and I couldn't be an announce team because we were too Southern.
Right.
Have you ever heard of anybody saying you're too Minnesotan?
No.
You're too Floridian?
Or too fat. But anyway, here I go. I use that. I'm just taking that word again. Blessed. I'm lucky that I didn't have a lot of heat with a lot of people in the business, and I'm proud to talk about the few that I did. And Kevin Dunn is one that a lot of people didn't know about. It was kind of a.
Well, actually, the thing is, he is nobody. Nobody knows who he is. He's just a dangerous behind-the-scenes influence, forcing wrestling out of the picture and forcing bogus horseshit, bullshit, sports entertainment, and Tough Enoughs, and diva searches, and strippers with big fake tatas, and all that stuff that you don't like seeing on the show. Kevin Dunn loves it. Because it takes him out of wrestling into the real world. Now, Kevin, you can become a real boy. I hated him. Fought with him all my life. Hated him ever since I've known him. He hates me. I hate him. Can't explain it to you enough. Love talking about it now.
I resemble that remark. Absolutely. And earlier I said that
he would knock your work when he didn't have a clue of a wrist lock from a wristwatch. And he would knock your work.
I said as long as there's an Undertaker and a Kane character, there's always a possibility for Paul Bearer to make a comeback one day. But after this, I don't think so.
Well, there's always possibility for a truck to run over Kevin Dunn, and we'd all be...
Exactly. Come on down the Mobile, hon. Come on down. I'll make you some grits and eggs.
Let him stop in Louisville first. There might not be... He wouldn't have them big teeth to eat them grits and eggs.
See him down there, and he can gum some grits.
We got to send him a copy of this. This is going far and beyond entertainment now, and it's just actually... making us
What's
jolly.
That lawyer's name? I guess we will get from it. But anyway, as far as having heat, the main heat that right off the top of my head, if I had heat with anybody, it was the women wrestlers or women.
Oh yeah.
That came in during that time period, and I'm talking about Sable. And
you and Sonny were lovely to each other.
And Tammy Sitch. Now I want to clarify this a little bit, and.
I used to have to referee some of this because I didn't
realize that you were.
I was Sonny's appointed babysitter because nobody else. I like Tammy because I've recognized and have told her this to her face many times. All since I began her career, that she's a cunt, and she knows she's a cunt. She's a miserable cunt, and that's why she got heat. But that's why she got heat.
Maybe that's why I hate Kevin Dunn.
And then, well, there.
Oh, that feels good.
Thank you. I love you. But Tammy, Sonny, God bless her, she could rub people the wrong way in about 2 fractions of a second.
She did me.
And God, you guys were at each other's throat, and because nobody really wanted to deal with her at that particular period of time, I was assigned to be her babysitter, for her to turn in her expense reports, or for her to do third parties, or anything that had to come through me. So I would impart it to her. So they come to me with, well, Sonny and Paul Bearer just hate each other. They're ready to kill each other. You got to do something. So now I love both of you in your own individual ways.
And I had forgot about this.
I've got to come in and go, please, can't we all just get along?
I forgot.
They've instructed me to somehow rectify this. Paul, I know. She's a bitch. She's a raging bitch. I know she is. Help me out here.
I forgot about your part in that.
She had made you so hopping up and down mad. And I laugh now to think back on it.
In hindsight, we're a few years later now. In hindsight, 2020, and Chris isn't with us anymore. And it's a shame. He was a fantastic talent and fantastic human being and everything. And, you know, he loved Tammy. That's fine. I love my wife, and you love your lady, and we all do. But that was the deal. They were young men. This has been a few years ago, and they just made it big to the big time.
That was 10 years ago.
It's been 10 years ago.
Almost.
So there's a lot of there's a lot of water under the bridge there, and I was already been there for several years. You know, I was already established with the Undertaker and everything. And here she came, and she just hit me the wrong way with the attitude that she had. And it's just one of the things that it's little things like, you know, I can remember one time we would do, remember the tent shows we'd do around Cape Cod? And
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? There was several
small arenas in the summer around the
some of them were real tents. Some of them were tents.
Yeah, some of them would be out
around Boston.
Tents.
There. I remember us being in one of those things. It was during one of me and Sonny's heated battles. It never physical, of course. It was always verbal. And most of it was behind each other's back, and somebody would tell somebody. I'd say something there, and anyway, the dressing room was something similar to the room we in. It was a hallway down the front there, and I just happened to open the door. Chris Candido's standing there, and I see Sonny. It's like an L there. Candido's here, Sonny's here, and there's a broom sitting in the corner as I open the door up. And I don't know where it came from. It's like a lot of things that we said. I don't know where the hate for Kevin Dunn came from. But it's in the heart. I just, and the knife in the back. There's not still have any knives in my back. Oh, wait, let me pull it out. Does it say KD or Jerry Lawler? It could be Jerry Lawler. That's the Tennessee handshake, right? Pull it out. But anyway, I opened that damn door. I saw Chris. I saw Tammy sitting there, and I grabbed the broom and I went, Chris, when you go home, here's your wife's and here's your girl's transportation. And I tossed him the broom. And me being the Undertaker's manager, which Chris probably could have whooped my ass. That's for damn sure. He's young and da da da. But me being protected by the Undertaker, thank God, walking in the shadow of the Undertaker, nobody ever tried it. But Chris went outside and started tearing up this patio. They had there was food. They served food and stuff, chairs, patio furniture and stuff. He started taking patio furniture, throwing it over the fence. He stuck a chair up in the tree and just went nuts. You know, instead of beating me up, he went out and took it out on the patio furniture. So shortly there, now I need to clarify this, Tammy. If Tammy's watching this, you know, I hope somebody points this out to her. I really would like to see, because I haven't talked to her since then, and I'm sorry about things that have happened, but there was a situation that happened at another arena, and as far as people ribbing me, was few and far between. If anybody ribbed me, it was the Undertaker. Nobody else ribbed me. Yeah. Because if they did, Undertaker ribbed me. Nobody else would. I went to the ring and I came back to my stuff, and I had a Halliburton. Everybody was carrying Halliburtons in, and somebody had took super glue and glued the locks on my Halliburton. Super glue shut, and everything's in there. Passport, money, the dollar.
And those things are about $250 a piece anyway.
Everything. Undertaker gave me this one. It was one of the expensive ones. And my shoes were in the toilet. My clothes were strewn everywhere and stuff. And immediately, I knew it was Sonny. It had to be Sonny.
And as a matter of fact, I remember, and that's why I thought it wasn't, because everybody wanted to see you go off on her, and I think it was a setup to see if you would murder her. I think it was.
And it was just, I knew it was her. And I'm sorry, Tammy, because it wasn't her. I didn't find out this until years later. That it wasn't her.
Remember that's when I came into it, because that's when I had to start refereeing. I'm like, it's too perfect.
Although it was somewhere out of Chicago, because I remember me I think Kane was with me, and we were driving back into Chicago. We were at a toll booth, and I look over to the side. Who's paying the toll at the same time we are? The same night that my shit got glued up, there was Chris and Sonny right next to us, and I started to roll. Kane hit the window lock. Well, I couldn't really. I reached for the window lock and everything. Because here's my chance, you know. And I'm going nuts. I'm beating all the windows and shit, you know. And they're looking at me like, look at that crazy son of a bitch. They didn't know. This is hindsight being 2020. They didn't know my stuff got glued up. They didn't know I'm putting all the heat on them.
Here's the classic thing. You have some people that have a natural affinity for each other, like we do. Where people just naturally get along. You have sometimes where people naturally don't get along, but for good reason, like us and Kevin Dunn, because our talents have been disrespected, insulted, put down, and held back because of his bogus attempts at television production. Or you just have people who, even though all they have to do is coexist in the same room for an hour a day, just rub each other the wrong way to the point where they are hopping up and down, screaming mad, and that was you and Tammy.
It was a natural thing.
And it was beautiful. It was beautiful in a way.
If we had met each other in different circumstances and in a different, you know, things would have probably.
You would have hated each other still.
It would have been fine, but it bothered me. Chris and Tammy loved each other dearly, and that's great, you know, because I know how I love my wife, and they were just young, and they had a big break, and what bothered me is Chris would kind of follow Tammy around, you know, like a little puppy dog, and you know what I'm talking about. And one day in Madison Square Garden, I called him out in front of all the boys. I said, "Chris, come here." And I called him around to the back, and I told him just what I told you. You know, I said, "This is what we think." And Percy, I love her. I said, "That's great. I just wanted you to know. You know, I don't like her." And it don't mean that I don't like you.
But remember when we were talking about that, I said, "Percy," and you just wanted it. You wanted it to be her. You wanted it to be her, so you had an excuse to grab her.
It was her.
But I said, "It's too perfect. It's too perfect. It can't be. They want you to kill her," because everybody was mad at her too.
But several years later, you know, I hated them forever for that. But several years later, I found out it wasn't them. It was Billy and Bart Gunn, the Smoking Guns, and they done it because they thought I had done something to their stuff.
Oh, I thought it was. I always thought it was somebody trying to set you up for that.
No, that could have. I found out that because Billy had told me later down the road.
Well, now who was it that did to their?
I don't know. I don't know. But they thought that I'd done something to their stuff, which is certainly not an angel. You don't see a halo around his head. I'd done my share of ribs through the years, but I was always the silent ribber type, where I would do something and run and sit down and watch what happened, you know.
Yeah.
And just whatever.
Set it up and then see the science project in action.
I swear, after all these years, and I'm man enough to say it now, that, you know, I'm sorry, Tammy, and I am. I did, you know, it was one of those things, wrong time, wrong place. And in fact, Tammy has publicly stated many times, and I have too, where she hates me, and I hate her. I really don't hate you. I did it one time, but I don't anymore. You know, I don't hate nobody anymore. I'm getting too old for this shit, this hating stuff, but I don't. So that's all water under the bridge there. But
and meanwhile, I'm sitting over here trying to figure out how to, because I like you and I like her, and as a matter of fact, there's so few people that I really do like. Now that you come to think of it, I couldn't believe two of them were actually arguing with each other. So I'm trying to. But now, Percy, can't you just no? Tammy, can't you just no?
The heat between us was so hot that I forgot about you being the mediator there. It has totally escaped my mind until this very moment. I remember it now, but I forgot those conversations that we had about Tammy. So that's all. Like I said, you know, I done my share of it.
It was like the Arabs and the Israelis.
It was. It was really bad. I hated her. It made me sick, and I started hating all the women. You know, when
Sable.
I hate, and the only one.
If she'd taken an AK-47 and just shot Merrow's career in the heart, could she have killed it any deader?
I don't know if it was the fact, Jimmy, that me and you being from the old school and came up the way we did, and being a manager, that this was where we were bringing in the valets and the divas and stuff, and this was the beginning of that, and it was killing us off.
I didn't have a problem with the valets or the divas as long as they were even remotely talented, even possessing of the ability of simple speech and movement, the barest hint of possible product knowledge whatsoever, any of those things.
But most of them, they didn't care.
And Sable was the ultimate warrior of females. She was built on a bluff, smoke, mirrors, and myth.
They had their own dresser. You know, some of those TV tapings, the buildings were so small, and you know how many guys were there. And this, you know,
two rooms of equal size, 47 guys and 3 girls.
But the girl, the guys would all be in one room, but the girls, there'd be 3 girls, and they'd have a giant room all to themselves. And if they needed something, oh, I need tampons. Oh, that's obvious. You need tampons. I figure you need them every day, as far as I'm concerned. And when you get a box of tampons, send some out to the production truck to
Kevin.
But anyway, we were talking about ribs and stuff.
I got to say one thing though about the women. Somebody asked me, this was several years ago, said, well, why? You know, there's not any good old-fashioned heel managers. And I said, well, it's because, you know, me and Paul Bear didn't look good in a bikini. You know, that was basically
we didn't look good in anything. I know I didn't.
Actually, I think, you know, maybe a nice short skirt.
Or you can't put icing in on a towel patty and make it be sweet. You know? But like I said, as far as I've seen, and you have too, so many, and a lot of, I get asked about ribs all the time, especially about the fans today. They want to know a lot of the behind-the-scenes stories and ribs and stuff. And the real good stuff, Jimmy, we can't tell. No. Other than we hate Kevin, the real good stuff, I can't tell because I can't point fingers, and people live in glass houses and throwing stones.
And also, sometimes it involves the people doing things they shouldn't be doing to begin with, so sometimes you can't tell.
And I'm not the angel.
But they got more complicated as time went on because it went from, and now almost nobody really ribs anybody.
No.
Because A, guys are all nervous, they're going to get in trouble. B, a lot of guys don't have the close connection they used to, so they'd really get mad. And C, nobody has time for it because they're too busy being miserable because it's all business now. But it got more complicated. It went from just the Steiners putting padlocks. One of the first TVs I made, the Steiners were already there. I'd been with them in WCW. I come back, my suit bag's hanging, Burlington, Vermont. Suit bag's hanging there, and I'm padlocked to the entire row of lockers. Right? So I got to find the bolt cutters. Simple rib. You'd see guys walking through the airport with 7, 8 heavy padlocks on their bag, adding an extra 15 pounds or whatever. Simple, the classics. Elegant, yet simple. But then it got more complicated. It got to where guys would start setting things up 3 days in advance and going buying props and having lookouts and swerving people. Doing something to somebody they didn't want to rib because they were going to rib the person they were ribbing the person they wanted to rib by doing something to somebody else because that person would think that it was them and then they'd get back at them while the other person was... And finally it got to be you had to keep a scorecard and I got confused.
You remember when Lawler first came in and said somebody shit in his crown? I watched the door! Percy watched the door! What are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to take a shit in Jerry's crown. Oh, God, I was proud now. You know who did it?
That was a fabulous thing to do, wasn't it?
Stephen Kern. Where's Steve Kern now? He's an agent for the WWE. He's shitting Jerry Lawler's crown. I love Steve to death. He won't be mad at me telling the world, but the world probably already knows.
And I like the King, too, but let's face it. King,
it was great.
The King had shit in Kern's paycheck envelope for years.
Just Kern. Not just Kern. Everybody. But it was things like that. And there's been a lot of poo-poo stories. Back to my friend Tammy Sitch. We were overseas in Germany.
Oh, I remember this one.
They were in the ring, and Sean Waltman decided he was going to poop in Tammy's poo-poo platter. We had Chinese. It was Chinese food, and he.
So it really kind of fit right in.
He poo-pooed, and I don't know what it was. It was not chicken or rice mixture, whatever the hell it was. And they did make us up containers.
Was there any corn involved?
And he did, and she went back to the hotel, and she ate it. And then it was great, because the next day we all got on the bus and everything, and of course, Tammy, did you like your poo-poo platter last night? And, oh, God, that wasn't the only time. I also got to see Sean Waltman shit in Sable's bag. Not in her food, but in her luggage bag.
I would have paid ringside to be sitting there for that one.
It was the night before we were going home.
Now, didn't somebody else get blamed for that started another row? Because that's when Sable and Sonny having their deal at that point. I think somebody blamed Sonny for Sable's turd.
Sable hauled that shit. She carried that shit in her bag all the way to Atlanta. When I was in customs in Atlanta, he went...
But once again...
She didn't know the shit in her bag.
Nothing could have stunk worse than Sable's performances to begin with. So if she's carrying a turd around, it had to only smell like perfume next to her.
Lord have mercy. But the ribs like that, and like if I got, like back to what I was saying, if I was a victim of a rib, it was usually the Undertaker, and because they had so much fun and I was so easy. But Taker never let nobody mess with me. I was lucky. Like I said before, I was lucky there. But if I would do something, me and Taker, the first few years we were together all the time. We were inseparable, constantly together, and I'm not ashamed to admit I was his babysitter. But I was the highest paid babysitter you probably have found around, and I had been in the business for quite a few years at that time, and I knew where my spot was. I was comfortable playing second banana and second fiddle, and that was my place. And so I made the hotel reservations, the car reservations, and I made sure that he was up on time, and we made the planes, and da-da-da-da-da. They would call me, Percy, we need Taker here, 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 and here, and here. And we were
managers to the extent, not shooting managers signing their checks and buying their stocks, but I did the same thing for the Express. as far as hotel reservations and trying to call up and get the seats on the plane in advance or whatever the case may be to facilitate the moving around the country a little bit, rental cars, etc.
And Taker knew how anal I was. He knew
because us anal managers.
I never ever would go to a town if I didn't have a car reservation, a hotel room reservation every town.
Don't leave the house.
And I would worry about that.
Yeah.
I would have, sometimes we'd be on the road for a couple of weeks at a time, and I had everything set up, and Lord help us, if somebody
twin sons of different mothers.
If somebody threw a wrench into that, if Ann Russo would back on the office,
oh yeah,
oh Percy, we need y'all to in between here and there, we need y'all to go here to do this and that or whatever, that just ruined everything. Because I had to go back and start from the beginning and rearrange everything, And they would have you, oh, Percy, we canceled it. We're going back to the original thing. Yeah. And don't you think Mark Calloway wasn't behind that, telling Ann Russo to tell Percy we got to do this, this, and this. He's going to change all the shit up. And then call it back and say, no, we changed our mind. You don't have to go. Jesus Christ, I got to go back and do everything all over again. But it'll be stuff. I remember one time in particular, we were driving back from Vancouver, Canada, down to Tacoma, a Seattle area, and it was real cold. And I know you hate the cold weather as much as I've been a Southern boy. I had to pee so bad. Oh, God. And I couldn't let the Undertaker get out and pump gas at a gas station. I just couldn't do it. Here's the Undertaker. I could not let that happen. And Mark knew
Undertaker
it. And don't think he didn't take advantage of that sometimes. So I had to pee so damn bad. Go pump the gas first and then go pee. And any of you men out there knows there's just something about holding a hose with water going through it that just makes it go worse. I'm standing there pumping gas going, oh my God, oh, am I going to make it, And all of a sudden the spot starts appearing on my pants, a little dribble, And I don't remember what color pants I had on.
The sign of things to come.
But you could see it, and we're on the way to the building. So I peed my pants right. Anyway, I got through pumping gas. I went back, relieved myself. We're going to the building. I think it was Tacoma. I get to Tacoma, walk into the dressing room, and there's a present there, wrapped with a bow on it. I mean, this was an hour before that, where this pee incident happened. And I get to the dressing room. There's a bow with a tag. Percy, what the hell is this? Open it up. It's a package of Depends from Vince McMahon. I couldn't fart unless Mark Calloway got on that damn phone and told Vince and Bruce and Pat and JJ, because they knew how I was, remember when I made the comeback with the big urn that had the big light in it? After Undertaker died and ascended into heaven, we started back at the United Center in Chicago, and they brought this big urn to me that had an airplane light. It was an airplane light, an airplane landing light, and it had a tremendous amount of batteries that had to power this. In fact, you had to plug it in the wall to charge it up. And it was heavy. It weighed like 50-something pounds. And
that's when Brian Lee was Undertaker.
Yeah, we had the Undertaker deal. So, okay, we used it for that thing. And I figured, I'm glad that's over. Vince goes, we want you to start carrying that to all the shows. So they gave me a case to put it in, and I waited at the airport. It weighed 78 pounds. I had to carry that to all the houses. So I'm not going to sell it right. So I go out and you buy me one of those luggage carts with the big wheels,
Yeah.
And I just sit it on the luggage cart and I pull it through the airport and all that. I'm as easy as I can make it. I made it, and then before every show, I made sure I got out close to Vince as I could. I knew where his office was, and I'd get me some Brasso, and I'd sit out there and I'd shine that urn.
I remember seeing you.
I would shine that urn every show that Vince was at, and after a couple of weeks, they'd see I wasn't selling it. They didn't care anymore, and they let it go. But there's so many reasons. I've forgotten more than I can remember, but Davey Boy and Owen, God rest their souls.
Yeah.
They were the best. And Mr. Fuji.
Yeah, Fuji was a dangerous man.
Fuji was a lot like me, though. If you pull some ribs, Fuji was the kind that would do it and then go sit back and watch. That's the kind of river I was. The silent type of river. I seen Fuji set people's clothes on fire before. Take their bag, dump it in the shower, pour lighter fluid on their clothes, and set their clothes on fire. The whole bag on fire. And that's the gospel truth. But Owen and Davey, they were just so fun. They'd done so many things.
Fuji was like a devious mastermind, whereas Davey and Owen were artists. They were artists at what they did, but they were more fun-loving, blatant kids out of it. Just like, I got you.
They would go behind Vince. Vince would be walking down the hallway at a TV tape, and they'd walk behind Vince. They'd take a can of aftershave. Shaving cream. And take a pin and stick it in the nozzle of shaving cream and heat it with a lighter where the hole was real small, so So if you press it, here's this, kids, this is a lot of fun you can do.
Yeah.
Take a pin inside where the shaving cream comes out, put a little lighter in it, just for a second, and it'll make the hole really small. When you press it, it'll squirt across the room. So they'd come up behind Vince and squirt shaving cream all over Vince McMahon's
up
back.
and down, up and
Exactly.
down.
And nobody wanted Vince. You got shaving cream all over your back. And just things like, and when they had
the squirt bottles.
Yeah,
the
now,
squirt
I
bottles.
love that. I've done that too.
The squirt bottles were great, but especially if you're standing in front of the camera like I am now, but you're doing a promo, it's going to be seen on a major, network affiliate in Philadelphia or whatever, and while you're trying to do this promo, they're squirting your crotch with the water bottle, so it looks like you're slowly pissing your pants.
That was one of my favorites to do, sit back with the squirt bottle and squirt people as they come by. Was you there when David Owen put the pigs in Vince's office?
Yes,
when they had
from the hog pin match.
Hog pin match. I don't know how many pigs it was. I guess maybe half a dozen. The hog pin match, if y'all remember that. They took them all and put them all in Vince's office. Here comes Vince, opens the door and here comes all the pigs out from the thing. Vince got ribbed a lot too, but he done his share of ribbing himself. And I remember them stopping at pet stores and buying a box. There's little white rats that you feed snakes.
Yeah.
They would stop and buy a whole box of these little white rats. Maybe a couple dozen of them, and just come in the dressing room and open them up, and there'd be little rats everywhere. And I remember vividly one particular time, Kerry Von Erich, bless his soul, and the Ultimate Warrior, which he self-destructed, I heard, in there killing these little rats, just stomping them like roaches. There's little baby white rats dead all over the floor, and just little things like that. And God help us if it was Halloween, if it was New Year's or 4th of July when the fireworks stands were open, because Davey Boy and Owen didn't stop, couldn't pass a fireworks stand by without getting some smoke bombs or this and that and the other. And I know I loved it. I seen them throw a smoke bomb in Sable's dressing room one time. I just loved standing back in the corner and watched. They'd light it and throw it in. All of a sudden, smoke's just pouring out. The fire alarm goes off. Whoop, 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 whoop. Here comes Sable with her towel wrapped around her.
No, that was the bad television alarm.
Yeah.
Whoop, 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 whoop. She's here. She's here. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
But we've seen, like I said, I forgot more than I can remember. It means so many. Was there anybody ever rib you?
Oh, Jesus.
What was the worst rib ever pulled out?
I don't know if I can call it worst one. I mean,
one that stands out right.
Well, riding with the Express. I mean, I've told some on some of these DVDs, but riding with the Express, the lots of ants, or just riding with Bobby Eaton anywhere. But also Jonathan Boyd one time. One of the first matches I ever had. I actually one of the first wrestling matches I ever had, where I had to wrestle, was a battle royal over in like Dyersburg, Tennessee. And I changed clothes, I put on my sweatpants or whatever I'm wrestling in, all my knee pads and everything. And I've left my clothes in the locker room. I go out and have the match, come back, and it's the last match, so I'm wanting to get out of there, get on to Memphis that night. So I put my underwear on, put my pants on, put my shirt on, go out and hop in the car. Right as I sit down, turn it on, start to pull out of the parking lot. Jesus, it's hot. Jesus, oh my God. He did the mentholatum, 3 fingers of mentholatum in the crotch of my underwear. And it takes a while. But once it sets in, you know it's there. And oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, I've had things cut up and pounced on and everything, but the Express, especially Stan Lane, we would go back and forth with each other. The glass breaking hammer, where you hit something and it has the glass break sound effect. We got Stan with that. Got Stan with the... It would be like week-long setups. One time Stan had read the book about the civil rights activists that were murdered in Mississippi, We Are Not Afraid.
Yeah.
And we're coming back from a town in Mississippi, driving back to Memphis. And, I mean, we'd been talking about the book for weeks. He'd read it, then I'd read it, we'd all read it. We're coming through the actual county seat. There's the courthouse where they were released. At about that time of night, right, I make sure to say, it was about that time of night, Stan, that those 3 civil rights workers were released from that jail right there. And this is probably the road they would have taken, because they were headed north as we're starting to go out of town. I said, yeah, these little Mississippi towns probably look the same 30 years ago as they do right now. Maybe there's a little bit more neon, but it was probably about this time that they saw the blue and red lights in their rearview mirror. And as Stan turns around and looked like this, I took my finger, hit him in the ribs, and went, bam, 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 bam! He jumped over the top of the console into my lap, hit a kung fu stance at the outside of the window, right? Like, and I started laughing, and then I ribbed myself because I was laughing so hard, and he was breathing so hard, we missed our turn and went 50 miles the wrong way in the middle of Mississippi. But almost caused him to have a heart attack. So then later on they'd get me. Mark was in the car one time. We go to a small TV town somewhere in Alabama. Mark's in the front seat. Bobby had been driving, and I think, no, Mark was back here. I was in the back seat with Mark. Stan was driving. Bobby was riding. So we get out and stop at a store. Well, I have a bug thing. I hate bugs. And Mark's probably said something about this because he still remembers it. Stan found in the middle of Alabama in the summertime a big dead hard shell bug that had to be that big, and put it right on the top of the cushion right behind my head, right? So I'd come back with my soft drink, open the door, sit down, and now Stan has come back around and he's sitting this side. So that way he can give me the Iggy. Because he looks at it like we're sitting here now, and Stan all of a sudden he looks over his shoulder, over my shoulder, and he goes, and I go, Stan, you're messing with me. No. Like that, and I turn around and I see this bug is right there in my face. I throw the door open and get ready to jump out of the car, but I push the door so hard that it slams back on my head as I'm getting out. Now I've slammed the door on my own head. So I get out, I start booting I'm trying to take the door off of the rental car. I'm booting the fucking door. Boom, boom. Mark's sitting there looking at me going, Jesus Christ. And I've actually bowed the door out where it wouldn't close all the way. I was so mad. My head's throbbing. I got a big dead bug on the cushion. And Mark's sitting there going, do you guys do this all the time? It's the first time he'd ever ridden with us. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, but I guess, has anybody ever ridden Mark Calloway? The secret of the Undertaker!
Aha!
Never been revealed! Did you know that the Undertaker hates, just as much as you hate bugs, if not worse, he cannot stand cucumbers.
No!
A cucumber.
A cucumber?
A simple cucumber. Pickles is fine. No cucumbers. So
not on the plate, not touching the food, not garnish.
No cucumbers. Nowhere within a 100-mile radius of cucumbers.
Not as a marital aid. Nothing.
No, not as anything, and not even plastic ones. Yeah, Waffle Houses sometimes. I've seen we come in after going out and having a few drinks where he'd go to the bathroom and he'd be drinking iced tea and he'd come back and there'd be a cucumber floating in his iced tea. I saw the Undertaker throw up all over a Waffle House because there was a cucumber floating in his iced tea. I've seen big pay-per-views where the Undertaker will be getting dressed, reaches for his hat, put a cucumber in his hat, or put on his purple gloves. I always called him the John Wayne thing. He'd gloves on and like John Wayne getting ready to walk. That's what his stance would be. He'd pull his gloves on, and there'd be cucumbers stuck in the fingers of his glove. Now I can't say that I'd done it all the time. I had a part in that, but one of the guys that really had fun doing that was Brian Adams, Crush.
Oh yeah,
because they're friends. Did
he ever share with you what began this animosity?
Yeah, I asked him. It was something to do when he was a kid. I guess his mother made him eat them or something when he didn't want to eat them or something, and he just hates cucumbers. And I was talking about the secrets of the Undertaker, which I have a lot. Most I can't tell. I get asked a lot sometimes. Well, y'all were together a lot of time, but what did you call each other? Did you call him Mark? Did you call him Undertaker? Did you call him Texas Red? Or did you call him, the Punisher or whatever? We had a very, very pet name for the Undertaker. Oh God, my phone's gonna ring. The ones that were real close to him, myself and Bruce Pritchard and Brian Adams and a couple others. We called him Wendy. Wendy's Hamburgers, the little girl in the front with the red hair. Because there was a time, we had the long, bright red hair, in the early years, he'd pull it back and whatever. And
it was curly.
And I think it was curly. And I think one time, somehow, it looked like he had the pigtails like Wendy on the Wendy Hamburger sign with the red freckles and the red hair. So we called him Wendy. And they called me, oh Lord, if I can tell the secret of the Undertaker, they called me Pooh Bear. Still to today, Vince will call me Pooh Bear.
Oh,
and they all
on the IFBs and stuff at the gorilla position, Pooh Bear.
Pooh Bear, Pooh Bear, but that's fine. Wendy.
Pooh Bear and Wendy.
Pooh Bear, that's right.
The most fearsome, scary combination in professional wrestling. Pooh Bear and Wendy on their way to the ring.
We done one thing with Mr. Hughes one time. Remember Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Where him and Taker had a short little to do there.
Very short.
And and he
brief even.
He grabbed me and choke slammed me and hurt me. So the picture painted for the TV as we're going off the air is Undertaker dragging Paul Bearer up the aisle.
They're big on dragging. I've been
big on
dragged.
So here's my big fat ass on the floor, on the carpet. You know, not the rubber smooth mats where it's easy. It's carpet. You know, where you can't get pulled so hard. Undertaker holding me by one leg, and I had to weigh, you know, anywhere from, I was always heavy. I weighed 350 to 400 pounds for years there, dragging me by 1 foot. You know, down the aisle. It was a long aisle too. I never thought it was going to end. I had carpet burns on my elbow. I've had carpet burns on my elbow before, but it wasn't been dragged down the aisle. But I had carpet burns all over me. And the last time that I was with Vince and Taker, which hasn't been that long ago, I guess back during the summer, they were doing TV in New Orleans or something. I had a chance to sit down with them, and we were having a drink and bullshit. And remember, this is Vince. Yeah, remember Mark when you dragged Percy down the aisle at so and so and so and so and so. Yeah, I remember it. Yeah, remember when I peed my pants and I had the peppers. You know, everything I did, it was just. It always got back to the office, you know.
I didn't have to get drugged down a long aisle. Of my rib drag was in the Cobo in Detroit, where they had a hockey floor. So it wasn't a very long aisle, but I had the bump and the step. And my head's going, I said, okay, I'll take that.
Me and you have endured, you know, being the managers and the type of managers that we are, the old school managers with the characters that we do. And the thing is, it's really us.
Yeah. What
when you see Percy Pringle, right? When you see Percy Pringle,
are you giving me signs back there? What are you doing?
You're good.
People walking around are messing with us.
Who are you? Is that one of Kevin's friends?
Yeah, I think
it looks like already knows. We're gonna get a knock here in a few minutes. Subpoenas, Jim Cornette, Bill Moody, defamation of character.
They've got to have the what character?
Oh Lord!
They've got to have the Ring of Honor offices bugged anyway, because that way they can keep track of what's going on in the wrestling business.
Well.
Since they're not in it.
Well, they got Howard Finkel.
Well, there you go. The Finkel.
What, you know.
Howard's a great guy.
Exactly.
I like Howard.
But what an abused human being.
Critically abused.
I have felt so bad for Howard so many times, because I've been on the other end of the ribs that we've talked about, where, you know, Taker would stooge on me to Vince for, you know, just having fun. But Howard has been so.
They would just fuck with his property without any regard.
24/7, they would make him. He loved the business so much, and he wanted to do good, you know. And he tried too hard. And they would do things like this. Right off the top of my head, I can think of a vignette they done with the Bushwhackers, where the Bushwhackers were eating sardines. So let's throw Howard in there too, and he's gonna eat sardines too. They kept, of course, the Bushwhackers like the sardines because they're from New Zealand and stuff. They ate that kind of stuff. And Howard, being from Connecticut, you know, he
probably had a lot of sardines in his life.
But he would do it because he was going to be on TV, and you know, he was happy to doing it. But I stood there and watched them do cut after cut after cut of Howard Finkel eating sardines till he was sick, and it was just constant from everybody.
They beat up his car on the street. You know,
it was endless, and was always pulling. He would be in tuxedo matches. Remember the announcer?
Yeah.
The announcer did, and they would pull his clothes off.
I love Howard. He's a great guy. Never wanted to see him in his underwear. Never had that desire. Constantly did. Never wanted to.
But Howard was always a nice guy. But he's a true company man from head to toe. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, and everybody knows it's you. I think I remember being told that he's the first employee of the WWF after the new area.
I don't know that he would have been the first one, but I know he's the longest tenured one. He's been there
when they changed over. What I meant by that, when they changed over from the WWF, when Junior came in and started the new company,
that's possible.
That Howard was the first person that he hired, and Howard was an usher at the Coliseum in Hartford, Connecticut, at the wrestling matches, and that's how he was discovered.
But I know he's been there longer than anybody.
Yeah,
but that's one of these days. That's the kind of person that's finally going to take an AK-47 and just wipe the whole place
Absolutely.
out. You know,
the only person going to take somebody.
You can fuck around. Pretty soon you won't be around, as Bobby Eaton used to say, and you can just needle somebody, and finally. And that's one of the. I would love to watch Howard flip. He'd come out like Arnold Schwarzenegger, have the daggum bullets strapped across his chest, automatic weapons in both hands, spraying the entire floor.
I just have memories. You know. I've had some bad memories. I've seen him crying, where they treated him so bad, where he would just sit and cry.
Yeah.
And if they'd done me the same way, I would probably cry too, because they treated him, and they treated him like shit. They really treated Howard like shit. And that's enough for Howard.
What do you mean they stuck him in Sonny's lunchbox and Sable's bag?
I think he had his nose up there anyway, because he liked sardines. He liked the smell of sardines. Now here I am. I just apologized to the girl, and you done drug me in the ditch again.
Starting it again.
Here we go, round 18.
Holy mackerel.
I didn't mean that.
After all this time,
his fault.
I still can't get them together.
It's his fault. Anyway, I forgot what we bought the Howard Street, but I was kind of parallel my career and your career. Like I was talking about the young man we talked to earlier. He asked if we had ever had any confrontations between each other. We'd been at ringside together, but we never actually had ever had any physical confrontation.
No, we were.
He said I hit you with the urn one time.
That's and I remember something about it, but truthfully, it goes back to that I couldn't do anything to the Undertaker, and you couldn't do anything to Yokozuna, so therefore that kept us from being physical in those matches, and we just had to chase each other around the ring to keep each other.
I can remember hiding behind the pole. I'd be behind the pole on Taker's side, you'd be behind the pole on Yokozuna's side. And we'd be looking at each other, exactly, this happened.
Like the evil monkey on Family Guy.
And getting paid to do it. Yeah. That's like this interview here. Man, you can sit down anywhere, anytime, and talk about wrestling for 3 hours. Yeah. We're glad to be here, Gabe.
Wrestling and ribs. And of course, I was there when they actually killed The Undertaker at the Royal Rumble, and he ascended to the heavens. And there were 15 people killing him, and you had to stand there and watch it, and I had to stand there and watch it, and then he suddenly becomes a ghost and wanders up to heaven, and I'm going, they're never going to believe this back in Knoxville. Oh, Lord.
But then we had another Undertaker, Brian Lee.
Yeah, Undertaker.
The Undertaker.
He was mine at that time.
Yes. Yes.
Do you remember, I think this is probably not telling anything that most people don't know about Brian, the classic incident where he was arrested in Nashville, Tennessee, for a variety of domestic disturbances, and told the cops that he was the WWF's Undertaker and please let him go. And they didn't let him go, but it made the news in Nashville, the TV news. WWF's Undertaker is arrested for violent domestic snavets. Mark was not a happy little camper.
To put things into perspective, Brian Lee was and still is a dear friend of Mark's.
Yeah, and
he was his best man in his wedding.
And Brian got several jobs only because of Mark.
Right.
To begin with.
And not only did he do that in Nashville, Mark lived in Tampa for a while, and Brian Lee was around there. And in fact, when Taker was on the road full time in the early years, Mark paid Brian to take care of his house and his animals and his dogs and this and that and the other. I mean, that's how close they were. But back to, they all ended up in Tampa several years down the road, and Brian was doing the same thing then. He would tell people he was the Undertaker. Mark would go somewhere, whether it would be the doctor or in the airport or something. Oh, we saw you the other day, or somebody met you. We met you, Mark. But he looked like he was a little bit shorter, and it was Brian Lee telling people that he was, the Undertaker.
Oh, yeah.
But back to me and you, how a lot of people say we're so much alike. I was telling Gabe when I first met Gabe that we are really alike, and we are in a lot of ways, because we grew up on old school wrestling, and I'm so proud. I'm proud to tell people that I grew up in the Territory days, and that I grew up with heroes that you've never even heard of.
And for people who are embarrassed that they're in wrestling and want to make it something bigger than what it is, it seems to me like the people who are embarrassed by professional wrestling and want to change it and make it something different, we feel equally the same. We are embarrassed about what they're making it. We were happy to tell people we were in professional wrestling until they made it whatever it is that they've made it, and now we're embarrassed by it.
Like, for example, I got off the train of thought again because I wanted to go somewhere else there, but we still got plenty of time.
I jerked you back in the wrong direction.
I just happen to think of being embarrassed. The most I've ever been embarrassed in the business, besides, here's another story, besides being at ringside, when I was managing Jim Hellwig, the Ultimate Warrior.
Oh, Jesus.
He was the Dingo Warrior there in Texas.
Oh, my God, in Texas.
Reunion Arena, one of the big shows on the holidays, Thanksgiving or Christmas, remember how those were. I was managing Dingo Warrior in a Texas chain match against George Wells. Master.
Oh, my God.
You understand?
Yes.
Words aren't necessary.
Say no more.
I might have talked about that. I think I talked about it at my part 1 deal. But anyway, back to my most embarrassing moment. When they done that Katie Vick angle.
Oh, God.
I have never been more ashamed to be in this business, ever, and I hope I'll never have to say that again as long as I live. That was the most horrible thing I've ever seen on television. It was, and what really hit, aside from that, first of all, they did it in Nashville. The people that know anything about me, I'm a big country music fan. I love country music, especially the old school country music, and I'm lucky to have some friends in country music I've met through the years, mainly because of wrestling. And my biggest hero of all is George Jones. And anybody that knows about me knows about my love for George Jones. So through the years, I've developed a friendship with George and his wife and his family and his band. And most of them live in the Nashville area, and they have kids. And when the kids want to go to wrestling, I always fix them up with wrestling.
Oh,
but
no.
I got George Jones all access passes. I can go in on the buses and backstage.
Oh, my God. And
become my friend. Anyway, long story short. Another long story short. No, I'm cutting it short. We got plenty of time, but we got plenty to talk about. But there was a show in Nashville. That's where that was done.
Oh,
so I got George Jones. My best friend in the Jones Corporation there is a guy named Tom Killen. He plays the steel guitar for George. He's been working for him now for probably about 23, 24 years. And he's got a couple teenage kids and stuff. And so I fixed him up with the tickets and everything. And they were there when that Katie Vick angle was done. And I was
mortified, no pun intended.
I was at home watching, and I called him. He wasn't there. He was on the road or something. The kids had went with their friends and stuff. And I just apologized. Here I am apologizing for something that I wasn't even involved in, but I'm apologizing on behalf of my business.
That you perpetrated them seeing that upon them.
I'm so sorry that your kids saw that, because I'm sorry I seen it. Because it was the most. I don't know who wrote that. I don't. And I don't really care who wrote it. Do you know who wrote it?
I don't have a clue who was. I mean, nobody wants to be responsible for that, but anybody who was involved in any way with it, I don't know what in the heck they were thinking. I don't know who would ever think anybody would want to see that. I still watched the TV shows at that point, and was watching that night. I think in the bedroom. Somebody help me. Was I? Yeah, well, sure was. And I saw that. I was like, this could possibly be a business killer here. This could be the end of,
It was just the most disgusting thing that I've ever seen associated with our business. In fact, there's a new book that was just released, a so-called unauthorized story of Kane and his family, and of course me being involved in that and all that. So I got the book, and I have everybody's book. I love the books. I can't wait to read yours. And anyway, I got the book just a couple weeks ago, and I sat down and I'm going to check it out, So I opened the first page. On the very first page, as soon as you open the cover, the very first page, the first line is the Katie Vick. Start talking about Katie Vick.
Oh, God.
I took the damn thing, I closed it, and I threw it across the room. My wife, Diane, says, well, what's the problem? I says, Katie Vick. I said, you go ahead and throw it in the trash. I'm not going to read it, But
something like that, and also, I don't know what the fascination is with miscarriages. That goof Ed Ferrara and moron Vince Russo. I had a problem with Ferrara one time when Terry Runnels, Marlena was allegedly pregnant and allegedly had a miscarriage for no reason. It sells no tickets.
Poor old Mae Young had a hand.
Oh, God.
That's all right. It's a hand.
That's in its own way. That's equally.
And come to find out, it was a glove, right? Come to find out, it had Moolah's initials on it.
Oh. I think that's probably as bad as Katie Vick in its own way.
What, the hand?
The hand, yeah. But I mean,
I love Moogle, I'm sorry.
Transvestites and hands and the thing with the miscarriage is bad taste. It doesn't sell any tickets. It doesn't make people watch the show. It doesn't make them buy the pay-per-view. It's a all negative, no positive. Nobody could possibly be entertained by it unless they're really fucking hard up for entertainment. But at the same time, there's a lot of negative because a lot of people will either have their feelings hurt or be offended by it. So you have all negative, no positive, and it makes you no money, but it gets you plenty of heat with the people you want to watch your show.
And there's a lot of
there's
a lot of things that I was involved in with the Undertaker. Some of the things that we did, such as trying to involve Steve Austin and using hearses and digging up dead bodies and all that stuff. Now, I didn't think nothing of it because I was so involved in it and everything, but other people did. But Katie Vick, my son wouldn't have anything to do with Katie Vick because I knew her, and her daddy's name was.
I think that you know the phrase "jump the shark."
Yeah.
From Happy Days, when Fonzie was water skiing and jumped a shark, that was when the series went down, and now it's a phrase in television that indicates when a successful television program has hit its creative peak and is plummeting downward at a fast spiral. And I was afraid, and it may still come to pass that we find out in the future, that Katie Vick was when wrestling jumped the shark. I never know.
I jumped a whale.
You've lost a whale. You're barely there.
I can feel it too.
You're less than half the man you used to be.
Thank you.
How much weight have you lost altogether?
240 pounds.
Oh my! How much further are you going?
I'm happy right now.
Good.
If I don't lose another damn ounce, I'm happy.
Good.
Because I can see things I haven't seen in a long time. Oh, yes!
I don't want you to go too far. I don't want you to go away too much.
Oh, I can't. That's me.
Yeah,
you have a hairy chest.
Ooh, thank you.
Remember Barbara Bush? Not the president's wife. Oh, never mind.
Oh,
she was Katie Vick's sister, I think.
Yeah, Katie Vick.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
But the things that managers have to go through, but you know the thing is, I draw a line between embarrassing things. When you do it to yourself on purpose, it's not embarrassing, right, because it is done and meant in the sense of drawing money, etc. But some of the stipulations of matches, you know, dressed in a diaper in a Superdome, fed by a baby bottle, or dressed in a pink dress, or you know, hung up over the ring, or had my pants ripped off, or just stupid or embarrassing or whatever things. What's some of the things that happened to Percy Pringle? Because Southern wrestling, right, you know, you didn't get touched much a lot in the WWF, but Percy Pringle got put through the ring.
I was everybody's whore. Exactly, and I loved it. It was so much fun, you know. Like Undertaker's mom, I had one foot in L.A. and one in Atlanta. But I enjoyed it. You got paid for it, just like a whore, right? I'm a prostitute! Oh, no!
What kind of stipulations were you in like, well, in the early days in Alabama, Mississippi, the small towns, what kind of stipulations? Because those were weekly towns, a lot of them.
The same.
You had to get the people coming back.
I'm sure nothing that you haven't been done before. Of course, the dress, having to wear a dress thing. And, which, right off the top of my head, I just had a flash to, I dressed in drag one time, complete.
Yeah.
And this was in Dallas, and I had my skinny times in Dallas, and I had my fat times in Dallas, both money-wise and physically-wise. But high heels, just knit stockings, a dress, wig, makeup, and everything, and sat in the audience at the Sportitorium, yeah, right in the middle of the crowd. And I had a program in front of my face, you know, like that was going to help. Most people didn't know. There was a couple.
You made a better woman than I did because I tried it in Shreveport and I didn't last 2 minutes before they spotted me.
It was when I was doing the deal with Chris Von Erich when I was working with him for a while there for a long time as a matter of fact, and I was barred from the building, so I came in dressed in drag, and I loved it. You know, in fact, I remember Jerry Jarrett. You know how Jerry Jarrett talks. I remember Jerry Jarrett saying, "Percy, you're enjoying this too much." Can't you picture Jerry saying that? Yeah, because I had pictures taken of me in the dress, and I still have them, you know, to this very day. In fact, I might have to give you one for the cover of the DVD.
That had to be challenging working with Chris Von Erich.
It was.
Oh my God!
But we talked a lot about the Von Erich, and which we're going to have a lot in common, you know, because we both worked there, and I followed you in there. You were there before I came in. And you managed the Pretty Young Things there, right?
No, I was still with the Midnight Express there, but we worked against. I wasn't with them. We worked against them.
You never managed them?
No.
Where did I get that from?
We worked against them because they were baby faces in Mid-South, and then they came over for a few shots in Dallas, but they were baby faces.
Which was Coco Beware and Norvell Austin.
And Norvell Austin.
Right.
In Michael Jackson gloves and red leather jackets.
Why? I thought
they just had a Memphis show like a couple months ago, the last Memphis Memory show they just ran. And it was, Norvell didn't make it, so it was Coco wearing Pork Chop Cash.
I just talked to Pork Chop.
And Pork Chop with a beard down to here, he's got to be 70.
Yeah, he is.
And they came out as the Pretty Young Things, and Dennis Condrey said, boy, y'all got a hell of a nerve calling yourself Pretty Young Things. And he said Pork Chop got the pop of the night when he came out firing those punches.
I swear, I for some reason, because the reason I asked is because I managed them in Florida. I left those out. When we talked about my Florida Pringle Dynasty days, the Pretty Young Things were part of the original group there. And I knew they just came from Dallas, and for some reason I had it in my mind that you had managed them there.
And you got Rude right after he went from Memphis to Florida,
right,
because he had come from Louisiana. We worked with him when he was really green, when he was Rick R-O-O-D, just starting. And then he went from Louisiana in the trade to Jarrett to Memphis, and then went to Florida right as we went back.
You never managed them?
We were going this way.
The missing link? You never had nothing to do with it? Never against him or never any missing stories?
In the locker room with him a few times in Dallas, but never worked against him. Or
was you there when Gary Hart cut him with a razor blade in the locker room?
No, I was not. Tell me this now, because I haven't heard this.
Oh, there was some...
Gary used to have the razor blade taped in the inside of his wallet.
Yeah, and his kid wanted his cigarette pack, too. Talking about an old school manager. That's Brother Gary Hart. And I love Uncle Gary to death. And... anyway, he carried a razor blade and wherever you carry one, I guess. But this particular night, he had one in his cigarette pack, cigarette carton. And him and Lincoln, he was booking Dallas at the time, and him and Dewey Robertson had some heat going on. Dewey was going through some rough times then, and he would say things, inappropriately. And one time he said something inappropriately about one of the Von Erich wives. And he was so blatant about it. It was basically boiled down to, does your carpet match your drapes? You know where I'm coming from there. And Gary Hart, which he's been a mainstay with the Von Erich family for all those years and everything, and everybody took offense to it. I did too. You don't say that, especially one of the wives. I don't care who it is. And Gary Hart heard about it, and him and Blink had a confrontation in the dressing room. I believe it was in Plano, Texas, one of those little suburbs of Dallas. In a high school gym. And Dewey stood up to him, and Gary pulled his blade out. And he didn't cut him deep. It wasn't no severe damage or anything, but he did put a little mark on him. It was a scratch on him. But the link, and you had done some stuff with Sunshine too. Valerie French.
Yeah.
There in Dallas. What a fantastic person she was.
She was great because she was a good promo. The people really believed in her because she could do an interview. She really sounded believable. She wasn't like over the top or anything, and she was a baby face then. And so, of course, I had to get under her skin and mess with her. And she was managing Hercules Hernandez at that time, who had been my bodyguard in Mid-South.
And I managed Hercules too.
And then you managed him in Florida. So it ended up with me and Sunshine in the famous the Tarrant County Convention Center, Fort Worth, July 4th show with the. I said I could beat her with blindfolded, one hand tied behind my back, right, or whatever. So of course I've got the bag over my head, one hand tied behind my back. And this is an old thing that Jerry Lawler and Joe LeDuc and the referee Tommy Marlin had done in Memphis. Of course, as soon as I'm blindfolded and tied up and everything, going, come on, Sunshine, with the good arm, you can't whip me. Immediately out comes Scott Casey and distracts Bronco Lubitsch, and in comes Kabuki and throws the side kick and knocks me ass over tea kettle. And I go down, and of course Kabuki jumps out and Sunshine tops me. Referee counts 1, 2, 3, and as she gets up, I'm groggy, I pull the hood off, and there's Sunshine standing over me. And I think she's got the kick of a Missouri mule.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh my God, and people loved it. That was all we did.
Was Ken Mantell?
Promo.
Ken Mantell was.
Yeah, but I gave him the whole thing. They almost screwed that up, even though I hand fed it to him. But
there was some good stuff then. Though.
Yeah, it was great. It was a promo.
Vignettes, they were doing the vignettes and stuff that hadn't been done before.
And I just insulted her back and forth. Nobody had ever jumped in everybody's. I said Sunshine's not a real name. Her real name's Virginia. They used to call her Virgin for short, but not for long. Was you there when
Stella May came in? Her aunt?
No, that was the year before. Stella May worked at my dry cleaners when I lived there. You know, and I would say, you know, I don't know what to say about Sunshine. God, I wish I could use the word slut on television. And I knew they were going to bleep it, but I'd make sure to look at the camera so they could read my lips. Everybody's, oh my God, I'd just say horrible things about her.
God.
And people wanted to throttle me. And
Fritz never said anything about that? You never got feedback off that?
No, either he didn't have his hearing aids turned up all the way, or else he wasn't there a lot then.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't come. I bet you I probably saw him in Fort Worth twice in 6 months I was there.
And he wasn't at the Sportitorium on Friday nights when he was there?
Well, see, I wouldn't do his promos on Friday nights because that was the syndicated show.
Okay.
I was doing them in Fort Worth for Dallas and Fort Worth, and coming up on the Star Wars show. But I jumped all over her. I just called her every name in the book.
I thought she was really good.
She was good.
Was you there when they done the deal with? She was David Von Erich's valet for a day when she was managing Jimmy Garvin. Did you ever see that clip?
I saw it. Yeah, I've got it on tape. We were still
awesome.
in Louisiana. That's when they were really getting the thing kicked off.
That was some hot stuff. Then definitely Gino Hernandez and Chris Adams were a hot team too.
Yeah.
And we all know what happened there. But back to the I know you was in some scaffold matches.
One of these days I want to get some residuals from that match too. It's the most famous match I ever had, and got a lovely check from Crockett.
Where was
blew my knee
That
out.
certainly wasn't your being from the Tennessee. That certainly wasn't your first one.
That's the first time I took the bump.
I never had to take the bump.
Oh, we'd managed a bunch, but that's the first time I took the bump. And the last time I took the bump.
Was it the first time you climbed up?
I'd been up partially a couple times, but
not all the way.
Not all the way, no. Because I'm not crazy about heights.
Well, I know that.
Matter of fact, when a high heel on my shoe, I tend to get nosebleeds,
Oh, I was in my first scaffold match in Fort Worth, Tarrant County Arena. It was me and Eric Embry.
Well, that was that huge tall one, right?
Against Cactus Jack and Skandar Akbar.
Like 30 feet or whatever.
That's the one that Cactus took the bump.
Yeah.
And broke his wrist.
Yeah.
And he's still
to this day
has trouble with that.
Yeah.
Because back in the day we weren't making no money, and nobody had insurance. Cactus didn't have no insurance or no money, so he didn't go to the doctor and just healed wrong. And here we are, 20 years later, and he's still having problems with. But I remember
I've got a calcium deposit on my foot from jumping out of the ring in high heels. We were talking about cross-dressing a minute ago.
Oh my God! When did you break your ankle?
I forgot to kick it off. I kicked the one off, and the other one wouldn't go.
I remember I was just scared to death. But once I got up there and got my bearings and stuff, and Akbar stayed with me.
Yeah.
And I've got some pictures of that where I'm just laying there and he's choking me for about 20 minutes. That's about all we did. And Eric and Cactus done the other stuff. But then I had a couple more later, and one I remember we had in the Mesquite Rodeo Arena. And I was still a babyface at the time. It was a 6-man scaffold match.
Oh, Jesus.
It was me and Eric Embry and Chris Adams against Tojo Yamamoto, Phil Hickerson, who was P.Y. Chuhai at the time, and Gorgeous Gary Young. Gorgeous Gary Young was going to take the bump.
Now, I got a Tojo on a scaffold. He was barely over 5 feet tall, and it was like a 25-foot scaffold. That had to look just so hilarious.
It took longer to get him up on the scaffold than it did for us to do the match.
And what would he be, 60 at that point?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
And I felt so sorry for him because they were behind him, because I've been the butt end of a lot of ribs, like we talked about earlier, but poor old Tojo was doing his best to get up there at his age, and they were behind him, thumbing him in the ass, trying to get him on up there. And anyway, I'd already
at one point, about 20 years beforehand, he was considered the baddest, toughest man in the Tennessee territory. Not only the fans thought that he could really kill people and was a martial arts expert, but he beat the piss out of those young boys.
I've heard those stories. But this particular scaffold match that we're all in, and I'd already been in a couple then, so I wasn't scared no more. I thought Tojo would be either being from Tennessee to do everything up there. And so we got up there, and long story short, Gary Young was going to take the bump. He took the bump, and we continued messing around up there a little bit, and I look over top of the scaffold, I see Gary Young's face coming back up. He took the bump off that scaffold and climbed back up again.
What?
Yes! And I went, oh my God. I went, Chris, look. Chris looked, brother, and Chris was a tough guy too.
Yeah.
When he needed to be. He went over and he kicked Gary right, slapped him. His face was right over there at the scaffold. He planted his face right in Gorgeous Gary Young. You know how many times Gorgeous Gary Young was Rookie of the Year?
About 4.
I think about 10.
What was his justification For taking the bump off the scaffold and climbing back up.
I have no idea. Well, you know how the boys think sometimes.
That would have been the first question on my mind.
Painted yellow?
I've not been painted yellow.
Well, I have been enough for both of us.
I had to wait one time for Jimmy Hart to be painted yellow before he could drive me to the hospital to get sewed up. But wear the dress, the baby bottle, handcuffed to people. I've been handcuffed to women, men,
mud matches,
giants.
Mud matches.
Never did the mud. Hey! Somebody said handcuffed to beds. Was that a word I heard somewhere? Chained to people, watched by people.
Bed?
Wait a minute. No, we're going back to wrestling now. What I'm trying to say.
We're talking about wrestling.
Well,
please.
I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? I don't know. He's on third. We're not talking about that.
Easy, James.
When was your first wrestling match as a manager? Because you had actual wrestling matches as a wrestler before you were a manager.
My first wrestling match. Oh, you mean
when you became a manager and then were forced to get in the ring?
It wasn't long. I mean, it was pretty damn quick.
When I started in Memphis, I'd been managing like 2 months, and then they booked me and Jesse Barr against Coco Ware and Jimmy Hart. I said, "What?" He said, Jimmy just said, "Just roll around, just roll around."
That was the deal for Southern managers. I mean, that was the nature of the beast.
Now in Mid-South, Watts waited forever. And Dusty waited forever before he let anybody get his hands on me or put me in a match or whatever. So it meant something and it drew. But boom, it was just in Memphis. I was just thrown in there.
Yeah, same here.
I'd actually never been inside the ropes while bumps were taking place. I'd never been in that position before when they booked me in my first wrestling match. So it was intimidating. I was like, oh shit, the backdrops look differently from up here.
Yeah, for the characters that we done, I mean, it was so easy to throw us in gimmick matches like that.
Just roll around.
And it happened quick for me because Frankie Kane, the Great Mephisto, was a booker there, and I think the first time was against him, where he had a match against something the Mongolians, Tapu and Tio, the Mongolians. Whatever
who were also the Samoans, who were also the Islanders, who were all Alpha and Sika. They never went the same place, but they followed Alpha and Sika around. Tapu and Tio.
And then, of course, Kamala, James Harris, started there with us too at the same time. And we first brought him in. We called him Sugar Bear.
Sugar
Harris.
Bear.
Yeah. And I was his manager. Now I talked about this a little bit on the first part of the thing, and some of the things that we got involved with. And this was back in in the 70s, and the racial things were still pretty hot back then. And I do the old Southern things where I'd bring him out on TV, and I'd take a dollar bill and throw it on the floor and make him pick it up. And when he'd been able to pick it up, I'd kick him in the ass on TV. And I talked about this before, that I got a letter I still have to the day from NAACP that said that Percy Pringle has done more to bring down the black race and what he's done on television. They've worked for 10 years. He tore down 10 years worth of progress.
Well, congratulations.
Stop it! No way! I'll shake your hand on Kevin Dunn, but I ain't going there, my friend. I live in Mobile, Alabama. We ain't dare cross that line. You gotta be proud that you've done more. Stop it! You're right again.
Just don't say yourself. You've done more.
Shut up! What was we talking about? Oh, I think I've turned red for the first time in this interview. Thanks to you.
Sugar Bear, we're talking about did you ever, I was going to ask you if you ever managed somebody. Did you know Troy Graham?
Oh, God, yes.
Because he loved Frankie Kane.
He was there.
Troy Graham, the Dream Machine.
He was the hippie when
I was born in the heat of the death. My mama died giving me life, the pride and the love of a father blamed for the loss of his wife. I love He did Dusty Rhodes' promos better than Dusty Rhodes did, with a little Tom Boogaloo.
He was one of our top baby faces there then, and I worked with him a lot. I remember one particular deal we done. We filmed on our TV in Greenville, Mississippi. They had an old building called the Sportitorium in Greenville, Mississippi, and they had a rock parking lot, and the fans would come in, they'd fill their pockets up with rocks. And of course, you know where I'm going.
Yeah.
And anyway,
I know where they're going.
Yeah, right beside my head. I remember a deal we done with Troy Graham where I was running around on the outside of the ring, and as I came around on the side where he was, he had a steel chair in his hand, and he came down and hit me square in the face with the steel chair. But I turned my head, I ducked it just a little bit where he caught me here. He really didn't catch this part of the face. But then I done the old towel burn gimmick where I burned my face all up and had bandages all over my face, and I went to the hospital and all that stuff. But yeah, I remember Troy. We had a lot of fun. A lot of
I used to, even before I got into business as a manager, I used to ride with him a lot because I lived in Louisville, he lived in Memphis, so we'd make the trips, and I learned a lot from him. But he always talked about Frankie Kane and Tom Shaft,
Tom Boogaloo Shaft. Yeah, they were all there when we were there, and this was me and Michael Hayes. And Terry Gordy, we all started right there in that territory.
And Tom Shaft had great promo material that nobody's heard these days. And a black guy speaking to the audience down here in Mississippi, it was like a precursor of the Junkyard Dog.
We'd done great business. And it wasn't a part of Bill Watts' territory then. The Calkins was running that state on their own, and we ran the whole state. We worked 6 nights a week and had TV over the whole state of Mississippi. And it was a good thing. And what a territory to break into.
But Biloxi, Jackson, Greenville, Greenwood, Hattiesburg, Vicksburg, Meridian.
All of it. From top to bottom. And it was just a good thing.
And who were some of the other guys there? Because I remember some of the...
Rip Rogers started there.
Rip was down here.
Started there.
And, oh my gosh. I'm trying to... Grizzly Smith worked there for a while.
When I first started, Grizzly was still there. Ernie Ladd was there when I first started.
He had a little semi falling out with Watts, but actually it was Watts sitting over there like, okay, this will kill a territory.
King Cobra. Remember
Jimmy Kendall?
Yeah.
From Memphis.
And, gosh, who else? It was such a great territory to start. For that to be my first real... I started in the business, but I'd work outlaw territories, This was my first real territory. We had a TV, we had Booker, we ran regular shows and everything. But what I loved the most is when we'd do TV in Greenwood, we were just south of Memphis. I could watch Memphis TV. And I never got to watch Memphis TV. We didn't have cable those days, so we never got to see that in Mobile. So we would have to stay, we'd do TV, I think we'd done it on a Friday night, and we'd have to stay over in Greenwood, and we'd got the TV signal from Memphis in there. And I made sure that I watched Memphis TV every Saturday morning, because I just loved it. Yeah. And you know where I'm coming from there.
Yeah.
It was just the best thing I'd ever, since buttered bread. It was just, I loved it.
And the live studio, and also the signal that they had, because those Memphis stations, 13 was strong, but 5 was a monster. Because Greenwood is what, 100 miles from Memphis?
Yeah.
And you would still get the station.
Yeah.
So 100 miles in every direction, the people could get the Memphis wrestling show, and they were watching it in ridiculous numbers because it was the highest rated program in the market of any kind, wrestling or otherwise.
Yeah, I just thoroughly enjoyed it. And backing up just a few years before, when I first started, I started in the business as a wrestler, if you can believe that. People find that hard to believe. I had my first match in 1974. And,
you and Mike Hendrick, right?
Yeah.
As
the Embalmers, I was a Mortician Undertaker a real one too. Still am. I guess you still could call me an Undertaker, couldn't you? And get by with it. Would I do that? No. But I went as the Embalmer, and I think my first...
Bobby Eaton, when he started, it was 15, he and his friend Orville Hutto were the Brown Bombers.
The Brown Bombers.
And just these brown masks and brown body shirts, and I said, boy, Bobby, if you'd had some yellow boots, you could have gone as a Drizzling Shits instead,
James.
Anyway.
I wouldn't say that.
Not bad.
But I started wrestling in the outlaw territories, down south in the Mobile area. And eventually I got a chance to go up to Memphis and do Memphis TV, as just a jobber. It was fabulous. I would drive from Mobile to Memphis for $15. I had to pay for gas, hotel, the whole 9 yards, but I was a wrestler on Memphis TV.
Memphis TV.
And I had done a job for Paul Orndorff in one of his first matches when he was first breaking in. One of his very early matches.
What name were you using then?
I was wearing a mask. I swear I can't tell you what name I was using then. But I was wearing a hood because he pulled my hood off on TV. He kicked my ass and pulled my hood off.
See, now this could be a frightening thing because I have some videotape of Orndorff from that was 77 when he was in. Now, I don't remember. It was 77 when he was in Memphis.
When I had my first match was in 74, but this was after that.
Yeah.
So this, 76.
I need to go look at what old 70s tape I have from Memphis TV with a new eye because I would never think to look for you. And because they had masked,
me and Mike,
the masked, job guy,
Because Mike was, he started working before I did.
I had Brute Bernard and the Angel with Homer Odell wrestling Mike Hendrick and somebody else when they came out. The babyfaces came out and painted Homer Odell yellow. And so
these people don't know who we're talking about.
You don't know who any of these people are.
You've heard about Jimmy's...
Go to the refrigerator, come back in 15 minutes, we'll be done. We're just having fun over
You've
there.
heard about Jimmy's lifelong childhood friend, Kenny Boland, who I love dearly, and who I attribute putting on many, many pounds on my body.
The world's largest wrestling manager, Kenny Boland.
He could get free food anywhere, anytime. Best, anyway. Jimmy has friends like I had. He's my best friend that we went to wrestling in high school together. That was our deal.
You and Mike Embry.
We went to school together, went to wrestling together, and that's where we met Michael Hayes, Anyway,
Wait a minute, you met Michael Hayes in high school?
No.
Are you sure? Was it detention?
No. Michael Hayes, no. I don't want to go there. I was going to tell some Michael Hayes stuff I shouldn't tell. I love Michael Hayes. He knows it. But anyway, this Mike Hendricks was my best friend then, and we broke into the business together. He started wrestling before I did, and when we graduated high school, I went into the Air Force right away. We graduated high school in 1972, and I went right into the Air Force, and he went to college to become a lawyer. So during the summers, he would wrestle, when he was out of school for the summers, and that's when you first saw him up in Tennessee, as all that. And then he done it for a number of years. He wrestled his way through college, literally. And I remember when I was working the territory in Mississippi that we were talking about, during one of the summers, he was living with Pork Chop Cash in Memphis, working that territory. And I would when I'd have time off, I'd drive up there and of course stay with him and go to the Mississippi Coliseum and all that stuff.
Pork Chop worked Mississippi too.
Yeah, he was there then.
Explain to me, because he was big in California, in the Los Angeles territory. He was a big baby face there, but I never actually sat down and asked him, because I didn't know until actually I was already out of the territory how old Pork Chop is, because at the time he looked 35, he was like 50.
Right, he would have to be.
He started really late, but he had a great body, and he flew, and he took these big bumps, and had the long beard with
I just talked to him probably a month ago.
He's got to be 70 now.
He's living in Jackson, Mississippi.
He was almost 50, 20-something years ago.
Yeah.
But it just, I would have never believed until I found out accidentally how old he was. And a lot of people probably don't even remember him, but he was in great shape and looked great. What a promo, in his own way.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of slow and laid back, But
a lot of our heroes back in our day when we were fans, they were older guys. Like Don Fargo, for example.
Yeah.
Don Fargo's in his 70s now, and if you start deducting the years, even if you take off 30 years, he was in his 40s or so when I thought he was the greatest thing in the world.
Well, in 1975 he came to Tennessee and he was shredded. He was down to 195 pounds, abs, 8-pack of abs. Come to find out he's like in his mid-40s.
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
And then he goes up to 300 pounds.
Yeah, and you see him...
And he's 60 and he looks like a dirty, ugly 40.
He's now.
He never looked good.
I seen Don.
I love him.
I see him often, and he's almost 80 years old, and he hasn't changed a bit. He still wears the leather. He still rides bikes, and
covered with tattoos.
2 years ago, he broke his hip, and I heard. I went, oh no, because I love him to death. And I said, this could be it for Don.
That's
when
always the beginning of the end when somebody old breaks their hip. But with Don, it was probably falling off a motorcycle, wasn't it?
It was. He came and kicked out of it, and he's fine. But the point I was making back when a lot of the stars were up in age then.
Yeah.
They were in their 40s and some even in their 50s.
You never got a chance to work on top before you were 35, even in a smaller territory, because you had to have the experience. And then I remember in Memphis, Lawler getting on top when he was that young because of his mouth. He was only 25, but the heels he replaced on top were 50. And the baby faces, except for Jerry Jarrett and Ricky Gibson, the baby faces were Jackie Fargo, Tojo, Eddie Marlin. They were all 50 years old.
Speaking of Gibson, how about Reuben Gibson?
There you go. He was down there. Robert Reuben started in Mississippi.
Because I talked about this in my first interview that he's a little younger than we are, but his brother was Ricky Gibson, so we kissed his ass. So we know. Yeah. We know Ricky Gibson's little brother, So we hung around a lot together. We worked out. He would drive over from Pensacola, and we built our own ring in our backyard. And we'd have matches and this and that and the other. But
and he started when he was 18. He'd already turned pro, because I think I took his first publicity pictures. Because
have you ever heard him tell the truth?
I've heard him stretch the hell out of it.
Even until today, he'll forget. I said, "This is Percy. Hey, this is Percy you're talking to. Please."
Hoot, you know.
He was. I think he's living around Tupelo. Last time I talked to him, and he was doing something. He called me. Person, you want to come up here and help me do my TV and stuff? And please, you want me to drive from Mobile to Tupelo?
Yeah. Hey, you want me to drive from Louisville? It's not actually. It's not Tupelo. It is. Oh, geez, if you said the name of the place in Mississippi, I would remember it. But at any rate, it's like he said. Well, it's only 200 miles past Nashville. I said, well, yeah, well, Nashville's only almost 200 the other direction. So what does that solve?
I never worked for Cowboy Bill Watts. I never worked that territory. You know, I was in Dallas during the time, and I used to hear the horror stories of the trips y'all made, and I never had to make we made some long trips in Texas every now and then, but most of the time we were home every night in Dallas.
Yeah, well, we were home because everything was always 250 miles in this direction, 250 in that direction, 250 in that direction. And the only time we stayed over usually was every once in a while in Houston or in Oklahoma. But the thing is, everything was in opposite directions. And there were no north-south interstates. And the roads, those two-lane roads going back and forth, it was insane. I think our worst week was 4,400 miles in the car. But that was only working 8 times that week. Because you worked every night, but there was a double shot only on Sunday. He had done away with the Saturday double shots by the time we got there. So, at least we didn't have to worry about that.
I mentioned the Von Erichs and stuff, and what's your... I talked a lot about the Von Erichs on my other interview, and I get asked about them all the time because I was there for so long, and I have a special place in my heart, for them all, and I don't think we've ever even talked about this, even together. And what is your thoughts about the Von Erich family, and your favorite thought, or
well, I can't say that I never got a chance to meet David, and I can't say that I disliked any of them. Mike was a good kid. Kerry was fine. I was around him probably more than anybody. Kevin, was always nice to us. We didn't get a chance to work with him really only a few times because we were working with the Fantastics. And Gino and Chris had that slot locked up, and then Gang had Kerry locked up with that's one of the reasons we didn't stay there longer was because we figured if we were going to get a chance to work with the Von Erichs, it would have come in the first 6 months we were there when they were putting the belts on us and building us. So, okay, we got here, but we didn't get here. So we ain't going to have the Freebird spot. We're not going to make that $150,000 and be home every night. Only work 5 days a week. We're going to be down here in the tag team match. That's why we moved on. But
I didn't realize that. I thought you might work with
no, some 6-mans and a few stray matches, but hardly. We worked with the Fantastics every night almost for 6 months in the same territory.
If I hated anything about them, I hated what they done to themselves.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is they were nice guys.
They were
weird in their own way, but
we all are.
Yeah, we all are. They were weirder than most.
We all like to be handcuffed to something.
They were weirder than most. Ooh.
Let's go, baby.
Ooh, baby.
This is another tape.
But and you got to pay more.
We're coming back. This will be at the motel.
Yeah. But
Can Pat Patterson be in it?
No.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Here I go again. I love Pat.
But the thing is what they did to themselves. They not only their lives but their business, etc. They had a great territory that all they had to do was not screw up, and they screwed up. And they had a great situation where they were gods in Texas, and all they had to do was not screw up, and they screwed up. And somebody, at some point, it seems like, when it got down to Mike and then Chris, somebody that could say something should have said something, it seems to me.
I think some did.
Whether it be Fritz, well, I mean, that they would listen, whether it be Fritz going, boys, but he wouldn't, he didn't.
They wouldn't.
I don't know. Somebody say something somewhere that they'll listen to. And obviously, maybe they didn't listen to anybody.
No,
I think they would have listened to Fritz, possibly, probably, but he didn't say anything either.
But after, I just have so many emotional feelings about it. It seemed after, I can imagine losing my brother. One of my brothers, much less another one, and then another one, and another one.
Yeah. And the one earlier, Jackie, the oldest, when he was a kid.
And then Fritz himself gone, and now the only one left is Kevin. It's just I just have so much, that whole world-class thing, the whole state of Texas, that whole thing. I'm really glad. I had a lot of highs and lows there, but I don't think I'd ever trade those days for nothing in the world. I really don't. I don't.
And it was fun to work there because it was a different style than almost anywhere else. Just kind of different flavor to me than almost any place else. Yeah. And they had kept things fairly simple to where the easy things still meant something. So it was kind of like stepping back in time a little bit. When you come from one of the more advanced territories where every finish in the world's been used, and people were into things. And I mean, just the spot shows, Grand Prairie, 16 miles from the apartment. You know, do a $15,000 house, make $300, get a loaf of bread, go home, watch the evening news. You know.
Yeah, it was so good and just so much fun, and just the fact that they're all gone now. And speaking of that, you know, a year ago, last week, Ray Traylor has been dead a year.
That's
Big Boss Man.
That's right.
We've lost so many brothers.
Yeah.
And I talked about this earlier. It was kind of a downer on the interview, but
it was right before, because we started doing the Midnight Express reunions, and we did the one in Ring of Honor with all four of us for the first time, and together like 15 years. And the thing I thought of when we started booking those was going to get Bubba involved in these, and that happened right before we did like the first ones.
And Kurt, and Rick, and Hawk. And this is what we were talking earlier when I mentioned the plane trip. Wahoo was in there, he's gone. Hercules was in there, he's gone. Rig was in there, he's gone. And the list is just on and on and on. And it just upsets me so much when I hear the fans that don't know these people. And these are guys that we know personally, you know, that we knew their families. We knew what they like to drink and what they like to eat, and we've been to their homes, or they've been to our homes, or we rode together, or we, you know, it's just when somebody goes, oh, so-and-so, he was a drug addict, or he was a steroid freak, or he was a pill that. Please, that's my brothers you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, how would you like me to say that about one of your brothers? You know, somebody that you work with. And no matter what you think about our business, and it's changed a lot through the years, and we can't argue that point at all. But there's still a brotherhood on there. I done a convention just a couple of days ago, and I'm sitting up on a table. Now, as I'm looking down, I have J.J. Dillon next to me, and then Slick. You know, Reverend Slick was there. The Bolsheviks, you know, Boris Zirkov and Nikolai Volkov, Adam Baum, Brian Clark, Kevin Sullivan, and I'm looking, and I'm hearing these fans asking these questions, and I'm going. And there was that feeling was there that I haven't felt in a long time. That brotherhood feeling.
Yeah.
How the dressing rooms used to be. You know,
Yeah, that's
it's hard to explain. You know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to get them to.
You know, I went to Valley Forge. I went to Charlotte also, and it's like now, at that point in time, you know, whatever trip you had to make, you got paid to make the trip, right? And once you got in the dressing room for the hour, 6:30 to 7:30 or 7 to 8 or whatever, and during the matches, you were in your own world with the people that belonged there. You would never see a fan or a photographer or anybody that didn't have a gun and a badge or wasn't a wrestler in the locker room. And that's the period of time where you know, had fun for the day, and then they paid you to make the trip back. The stuff you did there, you really did for free, and they paid you for the trip. But it doesn't feel that way now. You know, as Dutch Mantell said, I liked the business a lot better when the marks were out front. Or
and not in the ring taking bump.
Yeah, you know, you sign more autographs sometimes in the locker room now, and I'm not opposing any of the young guys that want somebody's autograph, but it's a blanket statement you make that sometimes you sign more autographs in the locker room now than you do in the crowd. It's completely different. Everybody's not. It doesn't seem like on the same page. There's these guys and these guys, and maybe these guys, but everybody's not together.
I get guys from the that are top,
you know,
some top names on the New York roster. They come up to me and say, "Oh, I used to watch you when I was a kid."
Yeah,
it makes you feel. It does. It makes you feel good. It really does in a way. Then a way it
makes me feel old.
And then I was going to say at the same time, it's a good bad thing there. And I was lucky because we talked earlier about when I was doing the talent scout thing, you know, for the company, and I was traveling to your area and stuff. Most of them were in your territory. You know, the Rock Lesnar's and Dave Bautista, and John Cena, and all these guys, Randy Orton, you know, they were there, and I had a chance to see them then. Yeah. And now I can appreciate what they're doing now, and they have some fine talents up there. Those guys are good talent.
You know what you said? I used to watch you when I was growing up. I went to Walmart one time about 5 years ago, at home in Louisville. Now I'm trying to get a bookshelf or something. And this guy comes up, and he's almost bald, and he's like, you know, he's got to be 35 at least. And this is 5 years ago, so I was 39, right? And he's, "You're Jim Cornette, aren't you?" I said, yeah, I am. I'm trying to get this shelf here. He said, "I used to watch you when I was a kid." I said, "Okay, hold on. That's it. Hold on. Let's break this down here. I've heard this a lot. I accept it. I say thanks, go on with it. With this, we're going to examine this. How old are you?" And I think he said that he was 33, right? I said, okay, you're 33. I'm 39. I started when I was 20. That means I've been doing this 19 years. I've been doing this since you were 14. That's not exactly a kid, right? That's a teenager. He said, well, I said, but where are you from? He said, well, I'm from Texas. I said, I didn't even make it there till 3 years later. So that means that you were 17. So you didn't watch me when you were a kid. You watched me when you were ready to graduate from high school. And he's like, well, I guess, yeah, now that you think about it, yeah, but I remember watching. I said, okay, I just wanted to prove the point that you weren't watching me when you were a kid.
I can appreciate that. James, I'm 51. I'm 51 now. I'm a few years older than you are. And I get these fans now. They come up and bring their kids up to me, you know, here they are, and they grew up watching me, and they did. And they bring their little boys, little girls, and you know who that is? That's the Undertaker's manager, Pauper, and they don't have a clue.
But I remember when you were Percy Pringle, because I used to watch you when I was a kid, actually. Sorry.
I've had about all I can take of this.
We're at WrestleMania, we're walking up the ramp, I swear to God. We're walking up the ramp, and one of the sponsors, guests or something, is coming, an old man in a walker. I remember you! And I said, I'll push you down this ramp if you say you watched me when I was a kid, or you were a kid.
But it's an honor. You know, it's an honor. It really is. And to everybody don't get the guys that are out putting roofs, you know, on houses and repairing cars and painting houses and putting asphalt on the streets. You know, they go home and get them a beer and kick back and watch wrestling and wish that they could do. That's what makes us so special, because they wish that they could do what we do, and we've been blessed to live our dreams that we've had since we were kids, both of us.
Yeah.
We're both fans, and if there's any two biggest fans in wrestling that have been blessed, here I use that word again, blessed to live our dreams, it's me and Jimmy. And I can't think of one thing that I've ever dreamed of doing that I haven't done in the wrestling business, except the first time I came to Louisville as for WWF when I was doing this talent scout stuff, and I got to see you and Danny Davis's operation there. This is before you moved into the new building. I was and I told y'all, I was so jealous.
Yeah.
It was perfect. You done your TV right there in the building. You had your wrestling school right there in the building. You done your own tapes right there. Danny Davis was a magician with equipment and stuff. You had everything right there. You were calling your own shots. You were running your own wrestling company. And I was so jealous. Something I've always dreamed of doing, you know, and I was really jealous of you, Dan. It was, but you understand where I'm coming from. We've been very blessed to do what we've done. And, is there one thing that you wish you could have done in the business you haven't? Because you've done way more than I have as far as the promotion end of it. And
I'd like to have managed Flair just to say I did it, but I did, you know. But at the same time, that's minor. But also, I think I'd like to still be running my own wrestling company and calling my own shots.
What, did you slap somebody or something?
Well, we found out that owning your own company and running your own company is two different things. I still own it. I just can't run it. But that'll happen in time.
Well, I'm still doing this. You still own it. I don't have a wrestling company. I like to. I'm going to start one day. I'm going to start one day.
But you know what? I just remembered something that we talked about in the car that you were supposed to remind me to ask you about working with Lou Thez.
Working with Lou Thez. Because I asked you if you'd ever worked with Lou Thez.
I never got a chance to.
When I first started in Mississippi, when we already talked about that era, who was there and everything, Lou Thez he was a friend of Frankie Kane and those guys, and he came in for a few shots. He was wrestling with him. And he had a match with one of my Mongolians, one of the Samoan guys that I was managing. And he was going to do a deal where he hit the ropes and I was going to pull his leg. First of all, they tell me this in the dressing room. You know, I'm just a young kid. I'm just getting my real break, you know.
And it's Lou Thez.
Lou Thez wanting me to pull his leg. And I'm going, and there's that, you know. Anyway, here we go. Into the finish. Boom, boom, he comes. I reach out to grab his leg. Missed it. He took two steps, turned around and goes, "You stupid son of a bitch." I was like the wicked old witch on Wizard of Oz when they had the water dumped on her. I'm melting. I melted at ringside. So that's it. My wrestling career is over. Lou Thez just called me a stupid son of a bitch. I missed pulling his leg, you know, and I'll never forget that. But you never had a chance to work with Lou, huh?
I mean, I've met him and talked to him many times, seen him at conventions. I've, you know, talked to him a number of times, but never in a professional atmosphere.
Did you ever go to Cauliflower Alley?
Yeah, I've seen him at Cauliflower Alley.
I've been going since I've been going. I haven't seen you.
I went several in Las Vegas several years ago. Went a couple on the East Coast.
I was a member for a lot of years. I just never went because I was always working.
Did several conventions with him, and the legend, the NWA champions get together in St. Louis, the pay-per-view that time. But I mean, and I've talked to Charlie on the phone several times, and I asked him for enough autographs, and I finally got embarrassed about asking because I had him sign his book again, a magazine, pictures, So I was around him before he died numerous occasions, but it was always after he'd retired. I never got a chance to work with him when he was still in the ring.
What was the first World Championship match that you ever saw in person as a fan?
As a fan, the first world title match I ever saw in person was Jerry Lawler and Jack Briscoe in 1974 for the NWA title. And the second one...
Oh, you remember the second one? I won't be able to remember.
The second one
I know the
was
first one.
January 1975, Jack Briscoe and Ron Fuller for the NWA title.
My first one was Dory Funk Jr. against Don Fargo. Our Broadway. I was sitting front row in the Mobile Municipal Auditorium.
My God.
And I guess I was still in high school then. And I'll never forget it. It was first of all, I'd never seen Our Broadway before.
Yeah.
And for it being for the NWA Championship, it was the first time I'd ever seen the NWA Championship. And it meant so much in those days. When we'd get to see the champion maybe once a year, if we were lucky, if we were really lucky, twice a year. And they would build up to it the whole year, and he would come in and it meant so damn much. They'd have championship prices.
Yeah.
First of all,
all tickets up a buck.
I was paying like $3 anyway for my front row ringside seat, and I had to cut 3 or 4 yards in my neighborhood to get that $3 to sit there. But championship prices, I had to pay $4 to sit there.
Yeah, and then you would go, can you imagine it? $4 for a ringside ticket? What the hell's this business coming to? It was just amazing.
Did you ever have any exposure to Bobby Shane?
Actually, funny thing is, I noticed, and I made a comment to Lawler about this one time, because I never got to see Bobby Shane. He died in '75. He was in Florida, and I'd seen him in the magazines, but I'd never seen him wrestle personally or on tape, because there was no tape then.
Right.
But the point being, long story short,
how many times have I said that?
I noticed in the magazine, because, Bobby Shane did the King thing too, and Lawler did the King thing, and a couple of years later I noticed in some old magazines that Bobby Shane made a face when he got punched and sold, kind of like what Lawler did. And that I noticed the similarity in the tights and the crown and the this and the that. Right. So I said to one time, I said to Lawler, I said, yeah, you got a few things from Bobby Shane, did he? He said, I got more than a few things from Bobby Shane. Because I started seeing that kind of crossways stagger cell thing.
I was lucky, but Bobby worked Mobile for a long time, made a lot of money. Well, I don't know if he made a lot of money. He drew a lot of money. I don't know how much they paid him. But the biggest crowd that I ever seen in my hometown wrestling arena, which is the Mobile Municipal Auditorium. Well, I guess you worked there through the years. I know one of the biggest things I ever did, we got to work in my hometown arena. Yeah. You in Louisville, the Garden. But Lee Fields was part of the Welch, the Fields, Fuller family.
Fullers, Welches, Goldens, Fields.
The same family. He was a promoter there for years, and he came out of retirement to wrestle Bobby Shane. And they made such a big deal out of it, and just built it up. The arena, the auditorium, seats legit about 10,000 people. They had people sitting in the aisleways. The fire department come in and had to stop selling tickets. Yeah. And it just made such an impression on me. And I just fell in love with Bobby Shane. He was just, I wish I'd had the chance to know him. I've talked to a lot of people about him, but I've heard so many stories about him. When I started with the WWF, the first time I went to St. Louis, I went to the cemetery to Bobby Shane's grave. Oh. I found out, I had the clipping where his funeral.
Schoenberger.
Yes. And he started out like we did. He carried jackets. He took pictures at the ringside.
But I've been able to get a few tapes since then of some Florida stuff, just a couple of TV matches and a promo or two. But you can see, he was a great worker. He was a good talker, and he had the color and he had the look.
But he passed away. Was it 75?
75.
So we're talking about. I started in the WWF on the road in January '91. So it must have been '91. And then from 75 to 91, he made such an impression on me that the first thing I had to do when I went to St. Louis was go visit Bobby Shane's grave. And I did, and I took pictures, and I still have them today. He made that big of an impression on me. What a talent, I thought. And I asked guys that were in the business that worked with him, was he as good as I perceived him to be, sitting front row ringside? And they've all had good things to say about him.
Yeah, I've always heard that he was very good.
And for the tragic ending that he had, in the plane crash with Gary Hart and Austin Idol, Michael Kors, and who was it? Gary Hart,
Bob Bruggers, wasn't it?
No,
he was in
Buddy Cope.
Buddy Cope. Bob Bruggers was in Valentine and David Crockett and Flair's planes.
Buddy Cope was flying the plane, and Bobby anyway, I was in JJ's book. JJ in JJ's new book. He talks about, he was in the territory at the time. He was on the same show.
Yeah.
Did you read that part of it?
That part,
he was in a different plane. They landed safely. Bobby Shane's plane crashed.
And he actually went over and helped
put him in the ambulance.
Pull him out and put him in the ambulance.
Look at the good. Oh my God!
And what are the odds that the two most famous plane crashes that both really played hell with the wrestling business in terms of top names both happened in the same year? 1975.
And Bobby drowned. He drowned.
He couldn't get out of the seat.
It wasn't really physical because all the other guys lived. They all had injuries, of course. Yeah. But Bobby, he drowned. He couldn't get exactly. He couldn't get out of the seatbelt and drowned. But wow, we could sit and talk forever.
Well, boy, Percy, thanks for bringing this conversation down to a screeching halt.
You remember, I'm from the dark side.
It's all fun and light, and all of a sudden, it died.
Oh, if you want to wait till you see my part one of my shoot interview. Oh.
Hey, and that's another thing.
Get your handkerchiefs out.
How dare you do a shoot interview before you did the shoot interview with me so that I didn't get to hear some of the stories you told?
Well, you will.
And this is available. You can purchase this from Ring of Honor as well.
Oh, exactly. Right? What's that phone number?
BR549.
Exactly.
The phone number.
Junior Samples will answer the phone. He's giving you a credit card number and telling him what you want.
Do you realize that there's probably people out there that have never heard of Junior Samples and weren't even born when Hee-Haw was on the air?
We were talking about wrestlers.
I said something last night, and I turned around and looked at people and said, and that was way too old for y'all.
I wasn't there. Okay, what was that name you said, though?
The Commissars and the Falco song from 19...
No, it wasn't Falco.
Because
shut up! Yes, it was.
I was
Falco,
listening.
Right? Yes.
No, it was not.
Well, I'm getting a nod from over here, so you can go bite.
Well, I didn't know what the hell you was talking about. I was listening to you because I was part of the deal, and I was standing in the aisle when you said it, and you said y'all probably too old. And I looked at the people, and I knew if I didn't know what it was, they sure in the hell didn't know what it was.
Actually, it was 1984. Yes, it was. Falco.
No.
Who in the hell's Falco?
Both. It was both.
Was that a music group?
Yes.
I'm betting somebody. Okay,
No.
They never played with George Jones. I can tell you that.
No, they didn't. But do you remember when Jimmy Hart wrote the song that he was gonna give to Tammy Wynette to sing?
Yes.
Called Tammy, why not give George another chance?
He gave me a copy of that. I have a copy at home.
Well, we won't argue about it here on the air. But if you know who was responsible for the song Der Kommissar in 1984, and I believe it was Falco. I'm going to win a bet.
I don't even know who is she anyway.
She's the cleaning lady. Just came in to mop up.
Well, get your broom, girl.
Yeah. It's sunny.
No. Please.
As a matter of fact,
we're on good terms.
She just moonlights at Ring of Honor. She's actually the full-time jizz mopper down at the porno theater. So
jizz mopper.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, she cleans up the
she's doing it with rag at you. Smell it. Does it smell like bleach?
Wait a minute.
Oh Lord. How? Oh.
Smells familiar, but I can't quite put my finger on it.
I heard you was a freak.
Anyway, so
let's be good. Let's be nice. I can't help I brought death in there. I'm from the dark side. What can I say? I can't help it. I love death. It's always been wrestling and the funeral business.
And what an apropos combination these days.
Exactly.
Because it's getting down to the nub on one or the other. I would say that probably the funeral business will last longer than the wrestling business.
Oh, for sure.
Because people are dying to get in the funeral business. Whereas, for the most part...
They're dying to get out of the wrestling business.
For the most part, they're just dying to get out of the wrestling business.
Gosh.
Some of the changes are good, but most of them aren't. And I hate to be pessimistic or cynical, but it's you have to work 3 times as hard to get half the response. people are, I think, the Ring of Honor fans are educated to the business, and they know the submissions, they know the names of the moves, they know the Japanese stars, the Mexican stars, etc. But you can be too educated to where, and I've said this many times, where you can take the fun out of it for yourself.
I was so worried last night.
When you know too much about something, there's no surprises, there's no pleasant surprises, no shocks, and there's no sitting back and just kind of relaxing and watching it. You know, I don't want to know every single
No. Why would you want to watch the movie if you know the finish and know how to do the special effects? And
and have already been through everything scene by scene and read the notes.
I was worried how the fans in the Philly area were going to take me when I done the deal with you here, and I was really concerned about it because of my past and then the games I portrayed and all that. Because I thought the first thing I was going to get, you are fat, or something like that, or you got concrete up your ass, or or whatever. And it wasn't that way, and it was so refreshing. Thank you, jeez. Yeah, they remembered. and then when you stepped through the curtain, when
I walked out, I was like, okay, I can breathe again.
That's the way I felt. That's the way I felt. It was.
Because and then also, you know, the times that I've opposed Bobby Heenan, you know, I had to say some pretty horrible things to these people in the aspect of being in the proper position for Bobby to be the hero of the day, and I don't know, maybe they still took some of it personally. They might say, "You get out of here, Cornette. We don't want to see you anymore." So, you know, it's always nice when you step through and you hear, because once you've been doing this for a while, when you hear the first response, you know how it's going to go.
Right.
Once you step out, 10 seconds, you know how it's going to go.
So run back and hide or keep on going.
Yeah, cover your head and you know.
Does it make you feel sad to know that it's never going to be the way it was when we grew up?
Oh yeah,
I wish my sons, you know, could experience what we
Nobody can feel the heat in the building or the emotion in the building or how over a baby face really was or how hot a heel really was or how excited people really were when you know a championship changed hands. You can see the tapes and see the people hopping up and down and screaming and throwing babies in the air, but you could actually feel the vibration and you could feel the emotion.
Absolutely.
You could feel when people were mad, and you could feel when they were happy. And we've lost all of that because now it's, instead of the NBA Finals, it's the Harlem Globetrotters beating the Washington Generals. It's a whole completely different kind of cheer.
And we talked about the brotherhood and the camaraderie that's been lost in the dressing room. You know, it's been lost out between the fans and the people as well. I mean, the fans and the performers.
Well, when you had weekly towns like Louisville, 52 Tuesdays a year, you know, the fans would sit in their reserved seats in the same place, same faces, all thousands of people, but you know, in this ringside area, and it was a social thing.
Yes, sir.
And they, as a matter of fact, in Louisville one time, this guy that had been coming since they started running the building, actually had to have surgery. He was an older guy, had to have surgery, and was not there. And they had the ring announcer announce to the people, "So and so's not here tonight, but don't worry about him. He just had to have some minor surgery. He's okay. He'll be back next week," because they were afraid that people would think the guy died. That's how impossible it was that he was not there. And so, you know, the camaraderie in the locker room and out amongst the fans, it's not the same anymore. It's cleaned up, homogenized, sanitized, pasteurized for your convenience. Yeah.
We're getting close to the end here, and I just, you know, I got a chance 2 weeks ago to sit next to Bobby, like I said earlier, and I got to tell Bobby how I felt about him. And Bobby's been through some real hard times with his cancer and everything, and he's kicked out of it. He's doing well, as you know. But I idolized him, just as you, forever. The old Percy Pringle, I copied all Bobby, the hair, the outfits, and everything. But I got a chance to sit next to Bobby and tell him. I said, "You're my hero," right to face to face, you know. I said, "If it wasn't for you, there wouldn't have been a Percy Pringle." I said, "I got to see you in the magazines and stuff. I never got to see you work, but I just
see. I got to see him. I stole even more stuff because I got to see him do his promos and work.
But and it's just something about. There's not a lot of us left, you know. The J.J. Dillons, the Jim Cornettes, and the Percy Pringles, the Bobby Heenans, the Paul Heymans, and I'm serious. You know where I'm coming from. There's not a lot of us left, and they ask. You know, I hear all the time, how come there's not any male managers anymore? And I like to say, oh, it's because of the tits and ass. It's because of da da da. I think, who do they have as role models? Who are the young teenagers of today that want to get in our business, not necessarily as a wrestler? There's other things to do in the business besides being a wrestler, as we well know. Who do they have as a role model like we had? As we had our Bobby Heenans, and we had our Sam Basses, and we had our J.C. Dykes, and we had this and that and the other. So how can we expect a young male that desires to get into our business in whatever aspect, we're talking about being a manager, who do they have as a role model? There are none, unfortunately.
It's a combination, real quickly, we'll wrap up, but it's a combination of the fact that the guys aren't used, they have no one to learn from now to be in the spot, and there's not a lot of people clamoring for the spots to begin with. It all changed all at the same time, and it's a shame, but that's a dimension of wrestling that's been taken away, and it'd be awful hard to put it back.
And bottom line is that I've been, and if anybody knows, Gabe knows, is I've been excited as hell about doing this with you. Ever since I saw the one that you done with Bobby Heenan, I said, I've got to do. Me and Jimmy's got to hook up. I just can't imagine me and you and Bobby doing one together.
I'm going to get every manager in the history of the business that's still breathing sitting on his couch sooner or later.
Paul Heenan?
Well, hopefully he won't be breathing by then.
You think we can get Kevin Dunn? He can sit right here between us.
Yes.
We could give him some pecans or any kind of nuts that he would like to chew on.
Oh, yes.
It's been a pleasure, my friend.
Percy, thank you very much. I love you.
And thank you.